Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Unraveled. Mitchell Becker had built his life like a fortress, methodical, calculated, and impenetrable. At 45, he owned 3 successful auto dealerships across the state, a testament to his ruthless business acumen honed during his 8 years as a Marine Corps intelligence officer. His wife Jennifer Weeks had been his college sweetheart, and Tyler Lawson, his adopted son, was now 18 and preparing for college. The suburban home in Millbrook Hills reflected Mitchell's success. Manicured lawns, a 3-car garage, and security cameras he'd installed himself. Old habits from his military days never died. Trust was earned, never given freely, and verification was always required. On this particular Saturday morning, Jennifer claimed she was visiting her sister Monica Dickinson in the city. Tyler had left early for his part-time job at the electronics store. Mitchell decided to tackle the spring cleaning Jennifer had been nagging him about for weeks. Tyler's room was a disaster zone of teenage chaos. As Mitchell moved the bed to vacuum underneath, his foot struck something solid. Hidden beneath was a locked metal box, military grade, the kind used to store sensitive documents. Mitchell's instincts, sharpened by years of intelligence work, immediately kicked in. The box was too heavy for documents. His lockpicking skills, rusty but functional, made quick work of the mechanism. Inside lay neat stacks of $100 bills, easily $15,000, alongside a basic flip phone and a small notebook filled with dates, times, and cryptic abbreviations. Mitchell's blood ran cold as he recognized some of the locations: parking lots near his dealerships, restaurants where he frequently conducted business meetings. The phone's call log showed dozens of outgoing calls to the same number over the past 6 months. As Mitchell examined the device, it suddenly rang. The caller ID showed only BH. Against his better judgment, Mitchell answered. "Tyler." A deep, gravelly voice asked. "The delivery is ready. Usual place, midnight." Mitchell remained silent, his military training taking over. Never reveal information unless absolutely necessary. "Tyler, you there? Don't forget, your mom's cut depends on this going smooth. Brian's getting antsy about the timeline." The line went dead. Mitchell stared at the phone, pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to form. Brian, he'd heard Jennifer mention a Brian from her yoga class. The money, the secret of phone calls, the coordinated schedule. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mitchell quickly replaced everything in the box and slid it back under the bed, but kept the phone. As he stood, Tyler appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Dad, I thought you were at the office." "Change of plans," Mitchell replied evenly, studying his adopted son's nervous demeanor. "How was work?" "Fine. Boring. You know." Tyler's eyes darted to the bed, then back to Mitchell. "Mom's not back yet. Still at Aunt Monica's." Mitchell watched Tyler's relief wash over his face. "Son, is there anything you need to tell me?" For a moment, Tyler's composure cracked. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed. "No, Dad. Nothing important." Mitchell nodded slowly. In interrogation training, they taught him that the most dangerous lies were wrapped in kernels of truth. His own son, the boy he'd raised, taught to drive, helped with homework, was lying to his face. As Tyler retreated to his room, Mitchell heard him making a hushed phone call. The words were muffled, but the panic in his voice was unmistakable. That evening, Jennifer returned home with shopping bags and a bright smile that now seemed forced. She chatted about her day with Monica, describing lunch at a restaurant Mitchell knew for a fact had been closed for renovations all week. As they sat down for dinner, Mitchell observed his family with new eyes. Jennifer's nervous laughter at his jokes. Tyler's inability to meet his gaze. The way they exchanged quick glances when they thought he wasn't watching. 22 years of marriage. 18 years of fatherhood. All of it built on what foundation? Later that night, as Jennifer slept beside him, Mitchell lay awake planning. In the Marines, they taught him that the most effective operations began with comprehensive intelligence gathering. He had 11 hours until that midnight meeting. 11 hours to learn just how deep this betrayal ran. The burner phone sat in his nightstand drawer like a loaded weapon. Tomorrow, Mitchell Becker would begin the hunt for truth. And if his suspicions proved correct, he would show no mercy to those who had dared to betray him. Chapter 2. The Moment of Truth. Mitchell spent Sunday morning acting the part of the perfect suburban husband. He made pancakes, discussed Tyler's college plans, and listened to Jennifer's animated story about Monica's new boyfriend. Every word felt like acid in his throat, but his face remained impassive. At 11:30 p.m., Mitchell positioned himself in his study with a clear view of the driveway. The burner phone sat on his desk, a digital countdown to betrayal. At 11:45, Tyler crept downstairs, car keys in hand. Mitchell waited 5 minutes before following in his other vehicle, a skill learned during surveillance operations in Fallujah. Tyler drove to Riverside Park, a secluded area near the old industrial district. Hidden behind a cluster of trees, Mitchell watched through binoculars as his son met with a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s. Brian Hagan was exactly what Mitchell had expected. Confident, predatory, with the kind of swagger that attracted bored housewives. The exchange was brief. Tyler handed over a manila envelope. Brian passed him a thick bundle of cash. But it was the third figure emerging from the shadows that stopped Mitchell's heart. Jennifer stepped into the moonlight, her arms wrapping around Brian's waist as they kissed with obvious familiarity. She laughed at something Brian whispered, the same laugh that had charmed Mitchell 22 years ago. Tyler stood awkwardly nearby, checking his phone. The family meeting lasted 10 minutes before they separated. Brian and Jennifer heading toward a motel on the outskirts of town, Tyler returning home. Mitchell beat Tyler home by minutes, settling back in his study with the lights off. When Tyler crept back inside, Mitchell was waiting. "Successful evening?" Mitchell asked, switching on the desk lamp. Tyler jumped, dropping his keys. "Dad, you scared me. I was just getting some air." Mitchell stood slowly, his imposing frame filling the doorway. "That's interesting. Because 30 minutes ago, you were getting cash from a man named Brian Hagan." The color drained from Tyler's face. "I don't know what." "Sit down." Mitchell's voice carried the command authority that had once ordered Marines into combat. Tyler collapsed into the nearest chair. "How long?" Mitchell asked simply. Tyler's hands shook as he stared at the floor. "Dad, I can explain." "How long?" "6 months," Tyler whispered. "Maybe 7. "And what exactly have you been delivering to Brian Hagan for 6 months?" "Information." The words came out as a croak. "About your business meetings. Your schedules. When you'd be at which dealership. Sometimes about your personal stuff too." Mitchell felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "What kind of personal stuff?" "Bank statements you left in your home office. Passwords you wrote down. Your gun safe combination." Tyler finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I never meant for it to go this far. They said it was just." "They?" "Mom and Brian. They said they needed to know these things for planning." "Planning what?" Tyler's silence stretched until Mitchell stepped closer. The boy who had once been his pride and joy flinched away. "Tyler. Planning what?" "Your accident," Tyler whispered. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Mitchell felt his world tilt on its axis. Not just an affair. Not just theft. Murder. "Explain." "They've been planning it for months. Brian knows people. Dangerous people. They're going to make it look like a carjacking gone wrong. Tomorrow night, when you leave the downtown dealership. They know you always take the same route home." Mitchell's mind raced through the implications. The life insurance policies Jennifer had encouraged him to increase last year. The way she'd been pushing him to update his will. the sudden interest in his business schedules. And after my accident, Mom inherits everything. She and Brian are planning to sell the dealerships and move to Costa Rica. They already have a house picked out. And you? Tyler looked up with desperate hope. I thought maybe we could all go together. Like a family. The naivety was almost touching. Almost. Did you really think, Mitchell said softly, that after they killed me, they'd keep you around as a witness? Tyler's face went white as the full realization hit him. They wouldn't. Son, you've been working for people planning to murder your father. What exactly did you think your life expectancy was after I was gone? For the first time, Tyler seemed to grasp the magnitude of his situation. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll help you stop them. I'll tell the police everything. Mitchell studied the young man who had called him Dad for 18 years. The boy he'd taught to ride a bike, helped with algebra homework, cheered for at baseball games. The same boy who had just confessed to helping plan his murder. Tyler, Mitchell said quietly, there are some things that can't be forgiven. But Dad, you made your choice 6 months ago. Every meeting, every piece of information, every dollar you took. You chose them over me. Mitchell walked to the window, looking out at the suburban paradise that had been built on lies. Now you'll live with that choice. What are you going to do? Mitchell turned back to face his son, and Tyler shrank away from the cold calculation in his eyes. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, with a few modifications of my own. I don't understand. You will. Mitchell moved toward the door, then paused. Tyler, pack a bag. You won't be living here much longer. As Mitchell climbed the stairs to the bedroom where his wife lay sleeping, his mind was already working through the tactical requirements. Jennifer and Brian wanted him dead by tomorrow night. They would get their wish, in a manner of speaking. But first, Mitchell Becker was going to show them what happened when someone tried to kill a man trained in psychological warfare. The game had begun, and Mitchell intended to win. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Mitchell woke before dawn, Jennifer still sleeping peacefully beside him. Looking at her face, the same face he'd kissed on their wedding day, he felt nothing but cold purpose. She stirred as he rose, offering a sleepy smile that had once meant everything to him. Early meeting? She asked. Something like that. Mitchell leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture of farewell she didn't understand. I'll be working late tonight. Don't wait up. By 6 a.m., Mitchell was in his study, calling Phil West, his former Marine Corps buddy who now ran a private security firm in the city. Phil owed Mitchell several favors from their Fallujah days. Mitch. Christ, it's early. What's the situation? I need a safe house, untraceable communication equipment, and a favor I can't explain over the phone. Phil's voice sharpened immediately. How bad? Family's compromised. I need to disappear for a few days. Say no more. I've got a cabin upstate. Off the grid, fully stocked. I'll text you the coordinates. Phil. This stays between us. If anyone comes asking, law enforcement, private investigators, anyone, you've never heard from me. Copy that. Mitch. Watch your 6 out there. Mitchell's next call was to Annette Hunter, his attorney and former romantic interest from his pre-Jennifer days. Annette had never married, focusing instead on building one of the most feared legal practices in the state. Mitchell. This is unexpected. Annette, I need legal advice off the record. If someone were planning my murder, what would be the most effective way to protect my assets and ensure the perpetrators received nothing? A long pause. Jesus. Mitchell. Are you serious? Deadly serious. My office. 1 hour. Come alone and use the rear entrance. Mitchell spent the next 30 minutes transferring funds from joint accounts to his personal accounts, changing passwords, and accessing his gun safe. The Glock 19 felt familiar in his hands, an old friend from darker days. At Annette's office, he laid out the situation with military precision. Her face grew progressively paler as he detailed Tyler's confession and the planned accident. "We need to contact the police immediately," she said. "No." Mitchell's voice was granite. "Tyler's confession would be worthless. He's a minor, and his testimony alone wouldn't be enough for conviction. They'd be arrested, make bail, and disappear before trial. Jennifer knows about the offshore accounts I've been setting up for retirement. She could access enough money to vanish. Then what do you propose? I'm going to let them think they've succeeded." Annette leaned back in her chair. "Elaborate." "Tonight, Mitchell Becker dies in what appears to be a carjacking gone wrong. My truck will be found burned out in the industrial district. Blood evidence will suggest I was killed and my body dumped elsewhere. And in reality, I'll be hunting them." Mitchell's smile was predatory. "I want you to set up a new will, effective immediately. Everything goes to charity, St. Jude's, Wounded Warrior Project, organizations Jennifer despises. She gets nothing." "Mitchell, this is insane. You're talking about faking your own death." "I'm talking about survival. They think they're playing chess with a suburban car dealer. They're about to learn they're facing someone who spent 8 years conducting psychological operations against people who invented the game." Annette was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" "Legal coverage for what comes next. And an alibi if anyone asks where I've been today." That afternoon, Mitchell executed phase 1 of his plan. He visited each of his dealerships, making sure to be seen by multiple witnesses. At the downtown location, he made a show of staying late, working in his office until 9 p.m. when most of the staff had gone home. At 9:15, he called Tyler from his office phone. "Dad, Mom said you were working late. Change of plans. I'm heading home now. Taking the usual route." Mitchell paused. "Tyler, I want you to know, despite everything, I love you. Remember that." "Dad, you're scaring me." "What's?" Mitchell hung up. By 9:30, he was in his truck, following his normal route home. But instead of continuing straight at the industrial district intersection, he turned left into the maze of abandoned warehouses. Phil West was waiting with a second vehicle and a duffel bag. "Blood packets in the cab, remote incendiary device in the engine compartment," Phil reported. "This thing will burn hot and fast once triggered." "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." Mitchell climbed out of his truck, activating the blood packets and spreading the contents across the driver's seat and dashboard. "Give me 10 minutes to clear the area." As Mitchell drove away in Phil's nondescript sedan, he triggered the incendiary device. In his rearview mirror, his truck erupted in flames that would burn for hours, destroying any chance of forensic analysis. By 11 p.m., he was at Phil's cabin, monitoring police scanners and local news feeds. The story broke at midnight. Prominent businessman Mitchell Becker's vehicle found burned in industrial district. Blood evidence suggests foul play. Police investigating possible carjacking. At 12:30 a.m., Mitchell's burner phone, a different one from Tyler's cache, rang. "Is it done?" Jennifer's voice, breathless with excitement. "Clean as a whistle," came Brian Hagan's reply. "Truck's still burning. Cops think it was a random carjacking. No body means they'll spend weeks searching the river." "And the police won't connect it to us?" "How could they? I was in Atlantic City all night. Got hotel receipts and casino surveillance to prove it. Your alibi's solid too." "What about Tyler?" "Kid doesn't know the details. Far as he's concerned, his dad got carjacked by random criminals. He's grieving, but he'll get over it." Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. "God, I can't believe it's finally over. When can we access the accounts?" "Death certificate takes about a week. Then we cash out and disappear. Costa Rica, here we come." As the call ended, Mitchell felt the last vestiges of his old life die. His wife was celebrating his murder. His son was complicit in his death. Everything he'd built, Everything he'd believed in had been a lie. But Mitchell Becker wasn't dead. And the people who thought they'd killed him were about to learn what true terror felt like. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 4. Gathering Intelligence. For 3 days, the world believed Mitchell Becker was dead. Local news ran the story. His dealerships released statements expressing shock and grief, and funeral arrangements were being planned. From his cabin hideout, Mitchell watched it all with cold detachment, using surveillance equipment Phil had provided to monitor his own memorial service. Jennifer played the grieving widow perfectly. Dressed in black, dabbing her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences from friends and business associates. Tyler stood beside her, genuinely shaken by what he believed was his father's actual death. The boy's guilt was written across his face. He thought his information had led to a real murder. But Mitchell was learning things that made his blood boil. Through directional microphones and hidden cameras Phil had installed around his house, he discovered the full scope of their betrayal. The life insurance alone is $2 million, Jennifer told Brian during one of their phone conversations. Plus the business valuations, the house, the investment accounts. We're looking at close to $8 million total. And the kid. Tyler gets his college fund and that's it. Once we're in Costa Rica, he can figure out his own life. Brian's laughter was harsh. Cold. Baby. I like that about you. Mitchell also learned about Brian's background through Phil's contacts. Brian Hagan was a former cop turned private investigator who'd lost his license for evidence tampering. He now worked as a fixer for wealthy clients who needed problems to disappear. Permanently. Jennifer had met him 6 months ago when she'd hired him to investigate Mitchell's business dealings, looking for grounds for a profitable divorce. Instead, they discovered something more lucrative. Mitchell was worth more dead than divorced. The extent of Tyler's involvement became clearer through recorded conversations. The boy had been feeding them information for months, believing he was helping his mother gather evidence for divorce proceedings. He had no idea about the murder plot until the final week, and by then he was too terrified and complicit to back out. But Mitchell's most important discovery came from Wayne Tuttle, Brian's criminal associate who'd helped orchestrate the fake carjacking. Wayne was a cocaine addict with gambling debts, and Brian had been using him for muscle work. Through careful surveillance, Mitchell learned that Wayne was supposed to have been the one to kill Mitchell, but Brian had decided to handle it personally to avoid loose ends. Wayne didn't know this. He thought Brian had chickened out and hired professional killers instead. This paranoia made Wayne a potential weak link in their operation. On the 4th day, Mitchell began his counteroffensive. First, he anonymously contacted Wayne's parole officer, providing photographic evidence of Wayne's drug use and association with known felons. Wayne was arrested within hours, creating stress fractures in Brian's organization. Next, Mitchell began haunting Jennifer and Brian psychologically. Using his knowledge of their routines, he started leaving subtle signs that someone was watching them. A coffee cup moved on Jennifer's kitchen table while she was showering. Brian's car alarm triggered repeatedly during the night. Fresh flowers appeared on Mitchell's grave, despite the cemetery being locked after hours. The psychological pressure began to show. Jennifer started drinking more, jumping at shadows. Brian installed additional security cameras around his apartment, but Mitchell's military training allowed him to avoid detection while still maintaining surveillance. Meanwhile, Mitchell was building his team. Through Annette's legal network, he contacted Monica Dickinson, Jennifer's sister. Monica had always suspected Jennifer was cheating but had no proof. When Annette approached her with evidence of the affair and murder plot, Monica was horrified but willing to help. Jennifer always thought she was smarter than everyone else, Monica told Mitchell during a secure meeting at Annette's office. Even as kids, she'd manipulate situations to get what she wanted. But murder. I never imagined she'd go that far. Monica agreed to act as Mitchell's inside source, feeding Jennifer false information while reporting back on her sister's state of mind and future plans. Mitchell's most valuable recruit was Roman Minor, a former Special Forces operative who now worked private security. Roman had been referred by Phil, and his particular skill set was exactly what Mitchell needed for the next phase of his plan. "You want me to kidnap them?" Roman asked during their briefing. Not kidnap. Relocate. There's a difference. Mitchell spread out architectural blueprints of an abandoned warehouse he'd purchased through shell companies. I want them isolated but not suspicious. They need to come willingly. What's the timeline? Soon. Jennifer's getting nervous, and Brian's starting to suspect Wayne might talk. They'll want to accelerate their exit strategy. As if summoned by Mitchell's words, his surveillance equipment picked up a panicked phone call between Jennifer and Brian. Wayne's lawyer is asking questions, Brian said. Wants to know about Wayne's whereabouts the night your husband died. We need to move up our timeline. How soon? Tomorrow night. I've got a boat arranged. We hit the bank accounts in the morning, transfer everything to offshore accounts, then we're on a plane to Costa Rica by midnight. What about the funeral? People will expect me to. Fuck the funeral. Dead husband, grieving widow, whatever. We'll be sipping mojitos while they're lowering an empty coffin. Mitchell smiled grimly as he listened. Perfect. They were going to run, which meant they'd be isolated and vulnerable during the transition. It was time to spring his trap. He made one final call to Tyler's burner phone, knowing the boy had been agonizing over his father's death for days. Tyler, this is your dad. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Tyler finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Dad. But you're dead. I saw the news. The truck. I'm very much alive, son. And we need to talk. Chapter 5. The trap is set. Tyler's hands shook as he drove to the location Mitchell had specified. A parking garage downtown, Level 3, Section C. His father was supposed to be dead, burned alive in his truck 4 days ago. Yet the voice on the phone had been unmistakably Mitchell's, calm and controlled as always. Mitchell waited in the shadows between two concrete pillars, watching Tyler arrive in his beat-up Honda. The boy looked haggard, eyes red from crying, guilt etched in every line of his face. Good. Guilt would make him malleable. Dad. Tyler's voice echoed in the empty garage. Mitchell stepped into the light. Tyler stumbled backward, his face cycling through shock, relief, and terror. You're alive. Jesus Christ, you're alive. Tyler started toward him, then stopped. But the truck, the blood, how? Sit down, Tyler. Mitchell gestured to a concrete ledge. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, Mitchell laid out everything he knew. Tyler's face went progressively paler as he learned about Brian's criminal background, the murder plot, and Jennifer's true intentions. She was going to kill you too, Mitchell concluded. After they got the money. Brian doesn't leave witnesses. Tyler buried his face in his hands. I never wanted this. I thought it was just about divorce. About Mom getting a fair settlement. But you knew about the murder plan. You admitted it to me. Only at the very end. Brian pulled me aside the night before and said there'd been a change of plans. He said it would look like an accident, that you wouldn't suffer. I was going to warn you, I swear, but then I got scared and you chose self-preservation over your father's life. The words hit Tyler like physical blows. He looked up at Mitchell with desperate eyes. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'll do anything to make it right. Anything. Mitchell studied his adopted son carefully. The boy was broken, genuinely remorseful, and completely under Mitchell's control. Perfect. Here's what's going to happen, Mitchell said. Jennifer and Brian are planning to run tomorrow night. They think I'm dead, which gives us an advantage. You're going to help me spring a trap. What kind of trap? The kind that ensures they pay for what they've done. Mitchell's voice was ice cold. But Tyler, understand this. Your participation doesn't earn you forgiveness. It might earn you survival. Tyler nodded miserably. What do you need me to do? Mitchell explained the plan. Tomorrow afternoon, Tyler would tell Jennifer that he'd been contacted by someone claiming to have information about Mitchell's murder. A mysterious caller who'd witnessed the carjacking and wanted to sell the information to the highest bidder, the police or Jennifer's family. You'll arrange a meeting for tomorrow night at the Old Riverside Warehouse District. Tell her this witness wants $50,000 for silence, and he'll only deal with family members, meaning her and you. What if she brings Brian? She will. Brian won't let her go alone to meet a potential witness. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Tyler looked confused. But Dad, if they're planning to leave town tomorrow night anyway, why would they care about a witness? Mitchell smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because I'm going to make them believe that this witness has information that could bring them down even in Costa Rica. Information about their offshore accounts, their new identities, their escape route. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jennifer and Brian would come to the meeting location believing they were dealing with an opportunistic witness they could either buy off or eliminate. Instead, they'd find themselves walking into a carefully orchestrated confrontation with a man they thought was dead. What happens to them after? Tyler asked quietly. That depends on how cooperative they are. Tyler swallowed hard. And what happens to me? Mitchell stood, looking down at the boy who'd helped plan his murder. You'll live. But Tyler, after tomorrow night, we're done. I'll make sure you have enough money to finish college and start your life, but you'll do it far away from me. We're not family anymore. The words devastated Tyler more than any physical punishment could have. He started to cry, great heaving sobs that echoed through the garage. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so fucking sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back trust, son. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Mitchell turned to leave. Make the call to your mother. Set up the meeting. And Tyler? If you double-cross me again, Roman Minor will be the last person you ever see. That night, Mitchell finalized his preparations. The warehouse he'd chosen was perfect, isolated, with multiple entrance and exit points, and completely soundproof. Roman had equipped it with lights, cameras, and restraint systems. Phil had provided additional security equipment and would be on standby as backup. Annette had prepared legal documents transferring all of Mitchell's assets to an irrevocable trust, with specific instructions for how Jennifer and Brian would be dealt with legally after tomorrow night's confrontation. Most importantly, Mitchell had prepared psychologically for what was coming. He'd spent years in combat zones, but this was different. This was personal. This was family. At dawn, he received the call he'd been waiting for. Dad. Tyler's voice was shaky. It's done. I called Mom an hour ago. She's bringing Brian to the meeting tonight at 10 p.m. They're scared, really scared. Brian's been asking lots of questions about what this witness might know. Good. Tyler. After tonight, disappear for a while. Go stay with a friend, take a trip, whatever. Don't be anywhere Jennifer or Brian might look for you, because they'll be angry when they realize it was a trap. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Because they won't be looking for anyone ever again. The line went dead, leaving Tyler alone with the growing realization that his father, the man he'd helped betray, was about to do something that would change all their lives forever. As night fell over the city, Mitchell Becker prepared for the final act of his deadly game. Tomorrow, the world would learn what happened when someone tried to kill a man who'd spent his life learning how to survive. Chapter 6. The First Cut. Jennifer spent the day pacing Brian's apartment like a caged animal, chain-smoking and checking her phone obsessively. The mysterious witness Tyler had described sounded dangerous. Someone who claimed to have seen Brian's face during the carjacking, and knew details only the killer would know. We should just leave now, she insisted for the 10th time. Forget the meeting, forget the witness. We have enough money to disappear. Brian was methodically cleaning his .45 caliber pistol, the one he'd intended to use on Mitchell before deciding the fake carjacking would look more convincing. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? No way. We deal with this witness tonight, permanently, then we're free. What if it's a trap? Set by who? Your husband's dead, kid thinks it was random criminals. and nobody else knows anything. Brian slammed the clip into his gun. We go in hard and fast. 50 grand to shut him up, or a bullet if he gets greedy. Jennifer watched him load extra ammunition into his jacket pockets. Brian, maybe we should think about this. Baby, I've been thinking about it all day. This witness is the only loose end. Once he's handled, we're home free. Brian pulled Jennifer close, kissing her roughly. Trust me. After tonight, we start our new life with clean hands. At 9:30 p.m., they drove to the Riverside Warehouse District in Brian's modified SUV. The area was industrial wasteland, abandoned buildings, empty lots, and no witnesses for miles. Perfect for making problems disappear. Jennifer's nervousness increased as they navigated the dark streets. Tyler said Building 47. Are you sure this is right? GPS says we're close. Brian checked his rearview mirror for the 20th time. Remember, we go in together, keep the meeting short, and don't let this guy get comfortable. They found Building 47 at the end of a dead-end street. It was a 3-story brick structure with most of its windows boarded up. A single side door was propped open, spilling yellow light into the darkness. Cozy, Brian muttered, parking 20 feet from the entrance. You stay behind me, and keep your hand on the backup gun I gave you. They approached the building cautiously. Inside, they found a small reception area with concrete floors and fluorescent lights humming overhead. A handwritten sign read, "Conference room, 2nd floor, follow arrows." This is getting weird, Jennifer whispered. Stay calm. Desperate people do weird things. Brian led the way up a narrow staircase, following spray-painted arrows on the walls. The 2nd floor opened into a large room that had once been a factory floor. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle under harsh industrial lighting. In the center sat a card table with a manila envelope and a bottle of water. Hello. Brian called out. We're here for the meeting. Please take seats, came a voice from speakers mounted in the ceiling. Mr. Hagan, Mrs. Weeks, thank you for coming. Jennifer and Brian exchanged glances. The voice was electronically distorted, impossible to identify. Who the hell are you? Brian demanded, his hand moving toward his gun. Someone who knows exactly what you did 4 nights ago. Please, sit. Let's discuss business like civilized people. Reluctantly, they took chairs near the table. Brian kept his gun partially drawn, scanning the shadows for threats. You claim to have witnessed my husband's murder, Jennifer said, trying to project confidence. What exactly did you see? I saw Brian Hagan set fire to Mitchell Becker's truck after spreading blood packets inside to simulate a murder scene. The voice was calm, matter of fact. I saw him dispose of incendiary evidence in a dumpster 3 blocks away. I saw him make a phone call to you, Jennifer, confirming that the job was done. The color drained from both their faces. This witness knew details that hadn't been released to police or media. What do you want? Brian asked through gritted teeth. Originally, $50,000 for my silence. But the more I've learned about you both, the more interesting this situation has become. Meaning what? Meaning Mitchell Becker isn't actually dead, and you two are about to discover what happens when you try to kill someone smarter than you are. The lights suddenly cut out, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Jennifer screamed as the sound of multiple footsteps echoed around them. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. 3 men in tactical gear had appeared in the room, faces covered, weapons drawn. But it was the 4th figure that made Jennifer's blood freeze. Mitchell Becker stepped out of the shadows, very much alive, wearing body armor and carrying an assault rifle with military precision. "Hello, darling," he said to Jennifer, his voice quiet and deadly. "Miss me?" Brian's gun was halfway out of his holster when the nearest tactical operator put him down with a taser. He convulsed on the concrete floor, his weapon skittering away. Jennifer tried to run but found the exits blocked. She backed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "You're dead. I saw the truck. The blood." "Oh, there was blood," Mitchell said conversationally. "Just not mine. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with some pig's blood and a basic understanding of forensic science." Brian groaned as the electrical shock wore off. The tactical operators zip-tied his hands behind his back and hauled him into a chair. "Tyler told you everything, didn't he?" Jennifer's voice was hoarse with terror. "Tyler told me about your affair, your murder plot, and your escape plans. He also told me about the information he'd been feeding you for months." Mitchell circled them slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "But what Tyler didn't know, what you didn't know, is that I've been aware of your activities for quite some time." "That's impossible." "Jennifer, I spent 8 years conducting intelligence operations in active war zones. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my own family was conducting surveillance on me?" Mitchell laughed, but the sound held no humor. "I let you gather your intelligence. I let you make your plans. I even let you think you'd succeeded." Brian struggled against his restraints. "You crazy bastard, this is kidnapping. When the cops find out." "The cops think I'm dead, Brian. They're not looking for me." Mitchell leaned down until his face was inches from Brian's. "And when they do find my body, which they will eventually, the forensic evidence will show that Mitchell Becker was murdered by Brian Hagan and Jennifer Weeks in a botched robbery." "What the hell does that mean?" Mitchell smiled, and for the first time in her life, Jennifer understood what real evil looked like. "It means, Brian, that you're going to confess to killing me. You're going to provide details only the killer would know. You're going to lead police to where you hid my body." Mitchell stood, his voice growing colder. "And then you're going to die in a tragic accident before you can stand trial." The room fell silent except for the hum of the industrial lighting. Jennifer and Brian stared at Mitchell, finally understanding that they weren't dealing with a suburban car dealer anymore. They were facing someone who'd spent years learning how to break people professionally. "Of course," Mitchell continued, "if you prefer the alternative, we can discuss that too." "What alternative?" Jennifer whispered. "You can tell me everything, every detail of your plan, every person involved, every dollar you've stolen or plan to steal. You can sign confessions taking full responsibility for attempting to murder me. And you can accept the consequences I've designed for you." "And if we do that?" Mitchell's smile widened. "Then instead of dying quickly, you'll live long enough to truly understand what you've done to yourselves." As the implications sank in, Jennifer began to cry. Brian renewed his struggles against the zip ties, but the tactical operators, Roman Miner and his team, were professionals. The game had taken a new turn, and Mitchell Becker was no longer playing defense. Chapter 7. The Confessions. Mitchell had learned interrogation techniques from the best Marine Corps intelligence specialists who'd broken hardened terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jennifer and Brian were pampered suburbanites who'd never faced real pressure in their lives. They would break within hours. The warehouse had been prepared methodically. Separate holding areas for each prisoner, recording equipment to document their confessions, and soundproofing that would contain any screams. Roman Miner and his team maintained professional distance, following Mitchell's orders with military precision. Brian was first. Stripped to his underwear and secured to a metal chair in a concrete room lit by a single bulb, he tried to maintain his defiance for exactly 43 minutes. "I want a lawyer," he repeated for the dozenth time. "This is illegal detention. When the FBI finds out—" "Brian," Mitchell interrupted calmly, "the FBI thinks I'm dead. The local police think I'm dead. My own wife celebrated my murder. So far as the world is concerned, you succeeded in killing me." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Do you understand what that means?" "It means you're fucking insane. It means," Mitchell continued as if Brian hadn't spoken, "that legally speaking, I don't exist anymore. Dead men don't kidnap people. Dead men don't commit crimes." Which raises an interesting question. What happens to someone who gets killed by a dead man? The psychological pressure was relentless. Mitchell had studied Brian's profile extensively. Former corrupt cop, gambling addiction, daddy issues from an abusive childhood. Every weakness was a pressure point to exploit. Jennifer's in the next room, you know, Mitchell mentioned casually an hour later. Roman's explaining to her that she has a choice. Cooperate fully, or watch what happens to the man she betrayed her family for. She won't break, Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Brian, she's been cheating on me for 6 months and helped plan my murder. What exactly makes you think she's loyal to anyone but herself? As if summoned, Jennifer's voice echoed through speakers in Brian's room. Sobbing, terrified, begging for mercy. Please, I'll tell you everything. Just don't hurt me. Please, Mitchell, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Brian's face went white. That's not. She wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Betray you to save herself. Mitchell chuckled. Brian, she betrayed a husband of 22 years and a son she raised from childhood. What makes you special? The psychological warfare continued for hours. Mitchell alternated between reasonable conversation and cold intimidation, slowly breaking down Brian's mental defenses. He played recordings of Jennifer's confessions, actually Roman interrogating an empty room while Jennifer was unconscious in another cell, making Brian believe his lover had already turned on him. By dawn, Brian was broken. I'll tell you whatever you want to know, he whispered, his voice hoarse from shouting denials. Just make it stop. Tell me about the murder plot. From the beginning. Brian's confession was comprehensive and damning. Jennifer had hired him 6 months ago to investigate Mitchell's business dealings, hoping to find evidence of affairs or financial impropriety for divorce proceedings. Instead, they'd begun an affair, and Jennifer had realized she'd get more money as a widow than a divorcee. She said Mitchell was worth $8 million dead, maybe half that in a divorce, Brian sobbed. She wanted him gone permanently. And Tyler's involvement. The kid was our inside source. Jennifer convinced him it was just for divorce research, schedules, meetings, business information. He had no idea about the murder plan until the last week. When did he learn about the murder? 3 days before. I pulled him aside and told him there'd been a change of plans. Said his dad would have an accident, but wouldn't suffer. Kid freaked out, but by then he was too deep to back out. And after my death, Jennifer inherits everything. We liquidate the assets, transfer the money offshore, and disappear to Costa Rica. Tyler gets his college fund and that's it. We leave him behind. Mitchell recorded every word, documenting the conspiracy in excruciating detail. Brian's confession would be legally worthless in court, obtained under duress and by someone who was legally dead, but Mitchell wasn't planning on using the courts. Jennifer's interrogation was different. Where Brian responded to intimidation, Jennifer crumbled under guilt manipulation. Mitchell had raised Tyler from age 3. Jennifer had given birth to him and watched him grow up. Motherhood was her psychological weak point. He's 18 years old, Jennifer, Mitchell said quietly as she sat in her cell, still wearing the black dress from his memorial service. Tyler's barely an adult, and you used him to help plan his father's murder. What kind of mother does that? I never wanted Tyler involved, she wept. That was Brian's idea. I told him we should leave Tyler out of it. But you didn't stop it. I couldn't. Brian said Tyler was already in too deep. If we backed out, he'd go to the police, and we'd all go to prison. So you decided killing me was the better option? Jennifer's breakdown was complete and devastating. 22 years of marriage, 2 decades of shared memories, and she'd thrown it all away for a criminal with a gambling addiction and a violence fetish. I fell out of love with you years ago, she sobbed. You were never home, always working, always focused on business. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. So you decided to murder me rather than ask for a divorce? Brian said a divorce would take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. He said there was a better way. And Tyler. Tyler was supposed to go to college and move on with his life. We were going to set up a trust fund for him before we left the country. Set up with money stolen from his murdered father. Jennifer couldn't respond to that. The moral horror of what she'd done was finally penetrating her self-justification. By the second day, Mitchell had complete confessions from both conspirators, documented evidence of their plot, and detailed information about their planned escape route. More importantly, he'd broken them psychologically to the point where they were completely under his control. But confession was only the beginning of Mitchell's plan. Here's what happens next, he told them during their first joint session since capture. They sat chained to opposite walls of the main room, forced to look at each other while Mitchell explained their fate. You're going to disappear. Brian, your parole officer will be told you violated terms and fled the state. Jennifer, your friends and family will learn you suffered a mental breakdown after my death and checked yourself into a private psychiatric facility. For how long? Jennifer whispered. For the rest of your lives, Mitchell replied matter-of-factly. You wanted me dead so you could enjoy $8 million in Costa Rica. Instead, you're going to spend whatever time you have left learning what real hell feels like. You can't keep us here forever, Brian protested weakly. Someone will come looking. Who? Brian, you're an ex-cop with no family and a criminal record. Your only friend was Wayne Tuttle, who's back in prison. Jennifer, you've been telling everyone for weeks that you need time alone to grieve. Monica thinks you're visiting a grief counselor in another state. Mitchell walked between them, his voice calm and conversational. You see, I've had months to plan this while you thought you were planning my death. Every detail has been considered. Every loose end has been tied up. What about Tyler? Jennifer asked desperately. Tyler made his choice when he chose to help you instead of warn me. He's alive, he has money for college, and he knows never to cross me again. That's more mercy than either of you deserve. Mitchell paused in front of them, his expression unreadable. You wanted to know what happens next? Tomorrow, we begin your education in consequences. You'll learn what it feels like to be completely helpless. To have your fate controlled by someone who sees you as less than human. To know that every breath you take exists only at the pleasure of someone you tried to destroy. He turned toward the exit, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. You'll have plenty of time to think about how this could have been avoided. All you had to do was not try to murder me. As Mitchell left them alone in the darkness, Jennifer and Brian faced the growing realization that their nightmare was just beginning. They'd succeeded in killing Mitchell Becker, the car dealer, the suburban husband, the adoptive father. But they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A predator who'd spent years learning how to destroy enemies without mercy or conscience. And this predator had all the time in the world to make them pay. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 weeks into their captivity, Jennifer and Brian had been reduced to shells of their former selves. Mitchell's psychological torture was methodical and relentless, calculated to break them completely without leaving physical evidence that could later be questioned. They were kept in separate cells most of the time, allowed together only during education sessions, where Mitchell forced them to confront the full scope of their betrayal. He made them watch recordings of Tyler's breakdown when he learned about the murder plot. He played audio of their own phone calls, letting them hear their casual discussions about disposing of Mitchell's body and celebrating their inheritance. Did you know Jennifer laughed when you told her I was dead? Mitchell asked Brian during one session. Actual laughter, she said. God, I can't believe it's finally over. Brian stared at Jennifer with hollow eyes. You laughed. Brian, She also asked when she could access the life insurance money, Mitchell continued. Seems she was more interested in the payout schedule than whether I'd suffered. The psychological warfare was designed to turn them against each other, and it was working. After weeks of stress, sleep deprivation, and constant fear, their relationship was disintegrating. This is all your fault, Brian snarled at Jennifer during one joint session. I was making good money as a private investigator. You're the one who wanted your husband dead. You were the one who said murder was better than divorce. You convinced me we could get away with it. Because you were crying about how miserable you were, how trapped you felt. I was trying to help you. Help me. You were helping yourself to $8 million. Mitchell watched their mutual destruction with clinical interest. In psychological warfare, the most effective technique was often making enemies destroy each other rather than destroying them directly. But psychological torture was only the first phase of Mitchell's justice. Phase 2 began when he brought in Jerry Acosta, a former cartel enforcer who now worked private contracts for people who could afford his specialized services. Jerry's job wasn't to inflict physical damage. It was to demonstrate how easily physical damage could be inflicted. See, the thing about breaking fingers, Jerry explained to Jennifer while she watched from her chains, is that it's not really about the pain. It's about the sound. That little pop when the bone snaps. Most people break mentally the first time they hear it. He held up Brian's hand, gently flexing the fingers while Brian whimpered. But we're not going to break your fingers today, Jerry continued conversationally. Today we're just going to talk about what it would feel like if we did. The psychological impact was devastating. Jennifer and Brian were forced to contemplate physical torture without actually experiencing it, which often proved more effective than actual violence. The imagination could conjure horrors worse than reality. Please, Jennifer sobbed. We confessed. We told you everything. What more do you want? What I want, Mitchell said quietly, is for you to understand what you stole from me. 22 years of marriage. 18 years of fatherhood. A family I trusted with my life. We can't give that back. No, you can't. But you can pay for it. Mitchell nodded to Jerry, who produced a small medical kit. Dr. Acosta here is going to help you understand pain the way I understood pain when I realized my family had betrayed me. But instead of physical torture, Jerry administered sedatives that left Jennifer and Brian conscious but helpless, aware of their surroundings but unable to resist or fight back. Paralytic agents, Mitchell explained as they lay motionless on medical tables. You can see, hear, and feel everything, but you can't move a muscle. It's how I felt when I discovered your plot, aware of the danger but powerless to stop what was happening to my life. For 12 hours, they lay paralyzed while Mitchell systematically destroyed everything they'd planned for their future. He showed them documents proving their offshore accounts had been frozen and seized. He played recordings of Costa Rican authorities being alerted to watch for them at airports and border crossings. Your new life is gone, he told them as the drugs wore off. Your escape route is blown. Your money is confiscated. You have nothing left except what I choose to give you. The final phase of Mitchell's justice was the most brutal. Complete isolation and abandonment. Here's what happens now, he told them during their last joint session. You're going to be separated permanently. Jennifer, you'll be transferred to a private facility where you'll live under the name Sarah Collins, a mentally disturbed woman with no family or friends. You'll receive basic care, food, shelter, medical attention, but you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that everyone you ever loved believes you're dead. Jennifer started screaming, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls. Brian, you'll be relocated to a compound in rural Mexico where you'll work off your debts to some very unforgiving people. Your gambling addiction made you vulnerable to loan sharks, and I've purchased your obligations from them. You'll spend however long you live repaying money you never actually borrowed. This is insane, Brian gasped. You can't just make people disappear. I'm not making you disappear, Mitchell corrected. I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. A new life far away from here. You just won't be together, you won't have any money, and you'll spend every day wishing you'd never heard my name. Roman Miner and his team prepared the transfers with military efficiency. Jennifer was sedated and loaded into a medical transport vehicle that would take her to a private psychiatric facility in Montana, a place that specialized in patients with no outside contacts or family visitors. Brian was handed over to Francisco Holden, a human trafficker who ran labor camps in remote areas of Mexico. Francisco's organization had a reputation for keeping workers alive just long enough to be profitable. As the vehicles drove away into the night, Mitchell stood alone in the empty warehouse. 3 weeks of planning and execution had resulted in perfect justice, his enemies destroyed, his betrayal avenged, and his new identity secured. Tyler had been relocated to a college on the opposite coast, with enough money to finish his education but clear instructions never to contact Mitchell again. The boy would live, but he'd live knowing he'd helped plan his father's murder and lost his family forever. Mitchell Becker was officially dead, his murder solved, his killers vanished without a trace. But the man who'd planned and executed this operation was very much alive, ready to build a new life far from the suburban paradise that had concealed such deadly betrayal. As dawn broke over the industrial district, Mitchell felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. His enemies were destroyed, his justice was complete, and his future was his own. The hunt was over. The prey had been consumed, and the predator was free to disappear into whatever life he chose to build next. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months later, Samuel Cross sat in a beachfront cafe in Belize, reading about the final closure of the Mitchell Becker murder case. Local police had declared Jennifer Weeks and Brian Hagan dead in absentia, victims of what appeared to be cartel violence near the Mexican border. Their bodies had never been found, but enough evidence had been discovered to convince authorities they'd been killed while attempting to flee the country with stolen money. Samuel Cross was 46 years old, a former military contractor who'd purchased a small resort on the Caribbean coast after inheriting money from a dead relative nobody had ever heard of. He was tanned, fit, and spoke fluent Spanish with the local staff. To his neighbors, he was a quiet American who kept to himself but was generous with local charities and always paid his bills in cash. The transformation from Mitchell Becker to Samuel Cross had been planned for years, long before Jennifer's betrayal had made it necessary. False identities were something Mitchell had learned to construct during his intelligence career, and maintaining them required constant attention to detail. Every aspect of Samuel's life was carefully curated. The resort provided legitimate income that explained his lifestyle. His background story, former military contractor seeking peaceful retirement, explained his skills and resources without raising questions. His relationship with local authorities was cordial but distant, the kind maintained by wealthy expatriates who wanted privacy above all else. The Belize operation was just one of 3 identities Mitchell had established over the years. He had similar setups in Colombia and Thailand, each with their own financial networks and documentation. If Samuel Cross ever became compromised, he could disappear and emerge somewhere else within 48 hours. But more than survival, the new identity represented freedom. For the first time in decades, Mitchell lived without the weight of betrayal or the burden of trust. He answered to no one, owed nothing to anyone, and could make decisions based purely on his own interests. The resort was profitable and growing. Mitchell had discovered he enjoyed the hospitality business. It allowed him to observe human nature without emotional investment. Guests came and went, staff worked and were paid, and nobody expected anything more complicated than efficient service and comfortable accommodations. The only shadow on his new life was the occasional news about Tyler. Through carefully maintained surveillance networks, Mitchell learned that his former son was struggling in college. Poor grades, drinking problems, and difficulty maintaining relationships. The boy was clearly suffering from guilt and trauma over his role in the murder plot. Mitchell felt nothing about Tyler's struggles. The young man had made his choices and would live with the consequences. Sympathy was a luxury Mitchell could no longer afford. The larger world continued spinning without Mitchell Becker. His dealerships had been sold to pay estate taxes and legal fees, with the proceeds going to the charities he'd specified in his final will. His house in Millbrook Hills had been purchased by a young family who had no idea of its history. The suburban paradise he'd built with Jennifer had been completely erased. Sometimes, late at night when the resort was quiet and the Caribbean waves lapped against the shore, Mitchell wondered if he missed his old life. The answer was always the same. He missed the illusion of his old life, but not the reality. The reality had been built on lies, sustained by betrayal, and destined for destruction. Better to live alone and trust no one than to build another house of cards that could be toppled by the people closest to him. On this particular evening, as Samuel Cross finished his dinner and prepared for another peaceful night in paradise, He received an encrypted message on a phone that only 3 people in the world knew existed. The message was from a net hunter, Tyler Lawson, found dead in his dorm room. Apparent suicide. Thought you should know. Mitchell stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Tyler had chosen his path 18 months ago when he decided to help murder his father rather than warn him. Everything that happened afterward, the psychological torture, the family destruction, the guilt and isolation that had ultimately killed him, was simply the natural consequence of that choice. Mitchell poured himself a glass of expensive rum and walked out onto the beach. The stars above the Caribbean were brilliant and uncountable, a vast universe where his small dramas meant nothing. Somewhere in that darkness, Jennifer was living as a mental patient with no memory of her real identity, thanks to the experimental drug treatments she'd been receiving. Brian was dead in a Mexican labor camp, killed by guards after attempting to escape for the 3rd time. The boy who'd called him Dad for 18 years was dead by his own hand, unable to live with what he'd done. Mitchell felt nothing about any of it. These weren't tragedies. They were problems that had been solved permanently. He finished his rum and walked back toward the resort, already planning tomorrow's activities. A group of German tourists were arriving in the morning, and he needed to ensure their rooms were properly prepared. The restaurant's new chef wanted to discuss expanding the dinner menu. The dive boat needed maintenance before next week's excursions. Simple problems with simple solutions. A life without betrayal, without family, without trust. A life where Mitchell Becker could finally rest, because the man he'd become had learned the most important lesson of all. The only person who could never betray you was yourself. As he locked the resort office and headed to his private quarters, Samuel Cross smiled. Tomorrow would bring new guests, new challenges, and new opportunities. But it would also bring the certainty that nobody in his life had the power to destroy him. He'd killed Mitchell Becker more thoroughly than Jennifer and Brian ever could have. And from those ashes, he'd built something stronger, colder, and completely unbreakable. The perfect revenge was not destroying your enemies. It was surviving them and building a life they could never touch. Samuel Cross had achieved exactly that.
And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thrilled you've joined us today and truly appreciate your support. We're curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect. Miles Donovan had built his fortune from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. At 47, he possessed the kind of wealth that allowed him to create intricate financial structures that even the most seasoned Wall Street veterans struggled to comprehend. It wasn't about tax evasion. It was about protection. A lesson his father, a once prosperous contractor who lost everything in a messy divorce, had impressed upon him before drinking himself to death when Miles was only 16. Never put anything in your own name, son, his father had slurred that final night. Not if you want to keep it. Miles had taken that advice and elevated it to an art form. His primary residence, a restored Victorian mansion on 3 acres just outside Boston, was owned by the Donovan Family Trust, which was in turn controlled by Hermes Holdings, an entity registered in the Cayman Islands. Miles maintained ironclad control of Hermes through a complex web of shell companies and proxy directors. To the outside world, he was merely a successful real estate developer. Only his attorney, Floyd Newman, knew the true extent of his financial empire. The irony wasn't lost on Miles. He had designed his financial labyrinth to protect himself from the government, competitors, and lawsuit-happy clients. He never imagined it would one day protect him from his own wife. Vivian had entered his life like a hurricane 6 years ago. He had been 41, she 28. They met at a charity gala, where she was working as an event coordinator. Unlike the society women who typically circled him, Vivian wasn't impressed by his wealth. Or at least, she was skilled at pretending not to be. Another real estate developer, she'd said with a smirk when he introduced himself. How original. Her dismissiveness had been intoxicating. The chase that followed, dinner invitations repeatedly declined, flowers returned, had only intensified his desire. When she finally agreed to a date 3 months later, Miles was already half in love with her. The marriage proposal came 6 months after that. Miles had offered a prenuptial agreement. His attorney insisted, but didn't press the issue when Vivian tearfully expressed how it made her feel like just another business transaction. He had been a fool, blinded by her dark copper hair and cynical smile, but not enough of a fool to put her name on any of his assets. As Miles stared out the window of his private jet returning from Singapore, he scrolled through the surveillance footage on his tablet. The camera hidden in their bedroom light fixture captured it all. Vivian and her lover, Deacon Mercer, the personal trainer she'd hired last year. Miles had suspected for months. The late-night texts, the sudden interest in fitness, the declining of his invitations to join him on business trips, a stark contrast to the early years when she would eagerly accompany him around the world. His suspicions had led him to have Floyd hire a private security firm. They installed hidden cameras throughout the house during a weekend when he took Vivian to New York, supposedly for their anniversary. That was 3 months ago. Miles had been collecting evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment. It wasn't just about the affair. 2 weeks ago, his security team intercepted a series of encrypted messages between Vivian and Deacon. They were planning something that involved Miles' extended trip to Singapore. "Mr. Donovan, we'll be landing in Boston in approximately 20 minutes. The pilot's voice interrupted his thoughts. Miles nodded to himself and closed the video feed. He opened another app on his tablet, a secure communication channel to Floyd. "Is everything in place?" he typed. The response came seconds later. "All set. Team standing by. Just say the word." Miles closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 6 years of marriage. 6 years that now seemed like an elaborate con. Well, Vivian was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong man to deceive. "Execute," he typed back to Floyd. Then he powered down his tablet and prepared for landing. Chapter 2. The Conspiracy. 3 months earlier, Vivian Donovan sat across from Deacon Mercer at a quiet table in the back of Whisper Lounge, a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of Boston. They'd been careful, separate arrivals, no physical contact in public, cash payments only. Vivian wore large sunglasses despite the evening hour and had tucked her distinctive copper hair under a black baseball cap. "He's planning another trip," she said quietly, swirling the ice in her vodka tonic. "Singapore. At least 2 weeks, possibly 3. Deacon nodded, his face betraying no emotion. At 35, he had the chiseled physique expected of a personal trainer, but his eyes held a calculating intelligence that had initially attracted Vivian. He wasn't just another pretty face with impressive muscles. He had ambition. "Is everything documented like we discussed?" he asked. Vivian nodded. "The lawyers confirmed it. In Massachusetts, if I can prove abandonment and emotional neglect, I can petition for temporary exclusive use of the residence during divorce proceedings. Miles has gone at least 20 days each month. I've been documenting every trip for the past year." What Vivian didn't mention was that it had been Deacon's idea to pursue this strategy. 6 months into their affair, he had casually asked about her financial arrangements with Miles. When she admitted there was no prenuptial agreement, his eyes had lit up with interest. "You realize what that means, right?" he had said. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. Without a prenup, you're entitled to a significant portion of everything acquired during the marriage." From that moment, their relationship had taken on an additional dimension. Lovers, yes, but also conspirators. Deacon had introduced her to Lorna Fitzgerald, a divorce attorney known for her aggressive tactics against wealthy husbands. "What about the deed to the house?" Deacon asked now, keeping his voice low. "Any progress there?" Vivian frowned. "That's the problem. I can't find a copy anywhere in the house. I've searched his home office multiple times. According to public records, the house is owned by something called the Donovan Family Trust. And who controls the trust? I don't know. Miles keeps all his business dealings separate from our personal life. He's secretive." Deacon's jaw tightened briefly. This was a complication. "What about his assistant? Patrice? Could you get information from her?" Vivian shook her head. "Patrice is completely loyal to Miles. She barely acknowledges my existence when I call his office. We need that information, Viv. Without understanding his financial structure, we're fighting blind. What neither of them knew was that Miles had begun suspecting Vivian's infidelity months ago. The first clue had been a misdirected text message that appeared on his iPad through their shared Apple account. A message clearly not meant for him, though it had been quickly deleted. Then there was the lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne in their bedroom, noticed when he returned unexpectedly early from a trip to Chicago. Miles had not confronted her. Instead, he began his own documentation, quiet modifications to his financial structures, digital surveillance, and background checks on anyone new in Vivian's life, including her suspiciously overqualified personal trainer with a last name that had been changed from Mercado to Mercer 5 years ago. Back at the Whisper Lounge, Vivian leaned forward. I have another approach. Miles' attorney, Floyd Newman, handles everything. His office would have copies of all the legal documents. Can you get access? Not directly, but Vivian smiled slightly. Floyd's assistant, Bethany, has always been friendly to me. I've been cultivating that relationship. She mentioned that Floyd is going on vacation next week. The Galapagos. Limited internet access. Deacon raised an eyebrow, impressed. So, while the cat's away... Exactly. I'm taking Bethany to lunch tomorrow. I think with the right incentive, she might be willing to help us get copies of some key documents. What Vivian couldn't have known was that Bethany Palmer had worked for Floyd Newman for 15 years. Her friendliness was professional courtesy, nothing more. And her mention of Floyd's upcoming vacation was a deliberate piece of misinformation, part of a counterintelligence strategy developed after Miles first voiced his suspicions to Floyd. Bethany had immediately reported Vivian's lunch invitation to Floyd, who had instructed her to accept and feed Vivian carefully curated information. Every detail would be reported back to Miles. Meanwhile, Miles had authorized the installation of state-of-the-art surveillance equipment throughout their home. Every conversation, every visitor, every search through his papers was captured and analyzed. He watched as Vivian and Deacon's conspiracy unfolded, always 2 steps ahead of their planning. As Vivian and Deacon finished their drinks and prepared to leave separately, Deacon reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand. Once we have control of the house, everything else will fall into place, he assured her. Miles will be negotiating from a position of weakness. Trust me. Vivian nodded, her expression determined. 2 more months. Then we make our move during the Singapore trip. Neither of them noticed the man sitting at the bar, apparently focused on a basketball game on the television. Harold Vincetti, retired Boston police detective and current employee of Sentinel Security Services, had been tracking their movements for weeks. As they left, he finished his club soda, left a generous tip, and made a phone call. Sir, they're still planning to move during the Singapore trip. We got all on audio. On the other end of the line, Floyd Newman smiled. Excellent. Send me the recording. Mr. Donovan will want to hear this personally. Chapter 3. The Deception. The Singapore business trip was supposed to last 3 weeks, but Miles Donovan had completed his negotiations in just 12 days. The development rights for the luxury condominium project in Singapore's Marina Bay area were secured, contracts signed, and local partners appeased. It was a substantial win for Donovan Development, adding another jewel to his international portfolio. Under normal circumstances, Miles would have extended his stay to explore investment opportunities in neighboring Malaysia or perhaps enjoy a few days of relaxation at the Raffles Hotel, where he maintained a permanent suite. But these are not normal circumstances. In his hotel room, Miles conducted a video call with Floyd Newman and Harold Vincetti from Sentinel Security. They've accelerated their timeline, Harold explained, his weathered face filling a portion of the screen. According to our surveillance, they're bringing in the security team tomorrow morning. For men from Bastion Security Services. Bastion? Miles raised an eyebrow. That's Deacon's brother's company. Correct, Floyd confirmed. We've looked into it. Bastion is owned by Travis Mercado. Deacon still uses his birth name in business dealings with his brother. They primarily provide nightclub bouncers and event security, but they're branching into executive protection services. Miles nodded thoughtfully. So Vivian gets to claim she feared for her safety because of my erratic behavior. And, conveniently, Her lover's brother provides the muscle to keep me out of my own house. That appears to be the plan, Harold agreed. They've been careful to create a paper trail. Vivian has been making calls to a domestic violence hotline from your landline. She's visited the emergency room twice in the past month, complaining of anxiety and insomnia, which she attributed to fear of your unpredictable temper. Miles' expression darkened. I've never raised my voice to her, let alone my hand. We know that, sir, Harold said. But she's building a narrative. She's also been transferring small amounts from your joint account to a private account over the past 6 months. Small enough not to trigger any alerts, but it adds up to about $250,000. The joint account has a $500,000 limit, Miles said dismissively. It's replenished monthly for household expenses. She's welcome to it. Floyd cleared his throat. There's more, Miles. Bethany reports that Vivian tried to bribe her for information about your financial holdings. Offered her $50,000 in cash to provide copies of trust documents and offshore account details. Miles leaned back in his chair, a faint smile touching his lips. And what did our loyal Bethany do? Provided her with exactly what we wanted her to have. The altered documents showing that the house is owned directly by Hermes Holdings, with no mention of the intervening trusts or the fact that you personally control Hermes through proxy directors. Perfect, Miles nodded. And our countermeasures? Harold took over again. Our team will remain in position, but unseen. We have 4 operators stationed in the guest house, monitoring the security feeds. Once Bastion's team is in place, we'll make contact with them privately. As discussed, we'll present the authentic ownership documents and offer them double whatever Vivian is paying. And if they refuse? They won't, Harold said confidently. I've researched Travis Mercado. He's ambitious, but practical. When he understands that his security license could be revoked for participating in an illegal lockout, he'll make the business decision. Miles nodded again, satisfied. I'll be arriving on flight SQ-26, landing at 7:15 p.m. tomorrow. Keep me updated on any developments. After ending the call, Miles stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his suite, gazing out at the Singapore skyline. The Marina Bay Sands complex dominated the view, its 3 towers supporting the famous Sky Park, a feat of engineering and audacity. Miles appreciated audacity. In fact, a part of him admired Vivian's boldness. It was a quality that had attracted him to her initially. But he had no tolerance for betrayal. His phone chimed with a text message from Vivian. Miss you. When are you coming home? The corners of his mouth lifted in a cold smile as he typed his response. Negotiations wrapping up early. Should be home tomorrow evening. Can't wait to see you. He could almost picture her panic as she read his message. The frantic call to Deacon. The rushed adjustment of their plans. They would need to move quickly now, bringing in the security team immediately rather than tomorrow morning. Miles sent another text to Floyd. Green light. They'll move tonight. Floyd's response was immediate. Team in position. All contingencies covered. Miles turned back to the Singapore skyline, his reflection superimposed over the glittering cityscape. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Never put anything in your own name, son. Not if you want to keep it. He had built his financial fortress to protect against business risks, never imagining it would serve as a bulwark against marital betrayal. Yet here he was, about to witness the effectiveness of his creation from a new angle. Miles poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25, raised a glass in a silent toast to his late father, and began packing for his journey home. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The private jet touched down at Boston Logan International Airport at 6:43 p.m., 32 minutes ahead of schedule. Miles had slept for most of the 14-hour flight, a skill he'd perfected over years of international business travel. He looked refreshed in his tailored charcoal suit as he descended the steps to the tarmac, where a black Escalade waited. "Welcome back, Mr. Donovan," said Roland, his longtime driver. "Straight home?" "Yes, Roland," Miles replied, sliding into the leatherback seat. "And take the route past Brewer's Pond, would you? I could use the extra few minutes." "Of course, sir." As the Escalade pulled away, Miles checked his phone. 3 text messages from Floyd with updates. Bastion team arrived at 9 a.m. For men, led by Travis Mercado personally. Vivian presented altered documents to them claiming full ownership. Our team made contact at 2 p.m. Travis agreed to our terms immediately. Miles smiled slightly. The final message had arrived just 30 minutes ago. All assets in position, waiting for your arrival to execute final phase. He put his phone away and gazed out the window as the Escalade wound through the affluent suburbs west of Boston. Twilight was settling over the landscape, lights beginning to twinkle in the windows of the stately homes they passed. Any specific music, sir? Roland asked. Wagner, I think. Ride of the Valkyries would be appropriate. As the powerful orchestral piece filled the vehicle, Miles closed his eyes briefly, centering himself for the confrontation to come. When he opened them again, they were turning onto the long, tree-lined drive leading to his estate. The house came into view, a magnificent Victorian restoration with modern additions that preserved its historic character while providing contemporary luxury. Lights blazed from every window, and 4 large men in black uniforms stood at attention near the front entrance. Bastion security, no doubt. The Escalade stopped at the bottom of the circular driveway, just inside the gate. Miles stepped out, straightening his suit jacket. Wait here, Roland. This shouldn't take long. As Miles approached, the security team moved to form a human barrier in front of the door. The tallest among them, a muscular man with a military-style buzz cut, stepped forward. I'm sorry, sir, but you can't come any further. This is private property. Miles smiled pleasantly. I'm well aware. It's my private property. I have documentation stating otherwise, sir, the man replied stiffly. This residence belongs to Mrs. Vivian Donovan, and she has requested that you not be permitted entry. At that moment, the front door opened and Vivian emerged. She was dressed impeccably in a black cocktail dress that Miles recognized. He had purchased it for her in Milan the previous year. Her copper hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was attending a gallery opening rather than orchestrating a marital coup. Miles, she said, her voice carrying across the distance between them. You're back early. Evidently, Miles replied, his tone conversational. I see you've been busy in my absence. This isn't your house anymore, Vivian declared, her voice taking on a harder edge. I've filed for divorce and secured a temporary order for exclusive use of the marital residence, effective immediately. You can collect your personal belongings tomorrow, supervised, between 10 a.m. and noon. Miles made a show of looking around at the security team. And these gentlemen are here to enforce this supposed order. They're here to ensure my safety, Vivian replied. Given your history of intimidation. Miles chuckled softly. That's quite creative, Vivian. Completely fictional, but creative. He turned to the lead security officer. You must be Travis Mercado, Deacon's brother, correct? The man's expression betrayed a flicker of surprise before returning to professional neutrality. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Actually, Travis, Miles countered, I think we should all go inside and discuss this situation like civilized people. Don't you agree? Vivian's voice rose in alarm. Don't let him in. I have the documents. The house belongs to Hermes Holdings, and I have legal authorization to occupy it during our divorce proceedings. Miles nodded. Hermes Holdings. Yes, that's correct. He reached into his inner suit pocket and withdrew a slim leather portfolio. Speaking of documentation, Travis, I believe you've already seen these papers? Travis Mercado's expression remained impassive, but a bead of sweat had formed on his temple despite the cool evening air. What papers? Vivian demanded, starting down the steps toward them. Miles opened the portfolio and handed several documents to Travis, who accepted them with obvious reluctance. These are the authentic ownership records for this property, Miles explained, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. The house is indeed owned by Hermes Holdings, which in turn is owned by the Donovan Family Trust. And as these documents demonstrate conclusively, I am the sole controlling trustee of both entities. Vivian froze halfway down the steps, her confident expression faltering. That's not possible. Hermes Holdings is an offshore company based in the Cayman Islands. Indeed it is, Miles agreed pleasantly. established by me in 2008, long before we met. The documents you presented to Mr. Mercado earlier today were, shall we say, incomplete. The actual corporate structure is a bit more complex. Miles turned back to Travis. As I believe my security consultant explained to you this afternoon, continuing to prevent me from entering my own property constitutes criminal trespass and could jeopardize your company's security license in Massachusetts, not to mention potential civil liability. Travis Mercado cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Donovan, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The documentation you provided earlier was insufficient. What? Vivian spat, her composure cracking. You're working for me. I paid you in advance. About that, Miles interjected smoothly. Mr. Mercado and his team have agreed to a change in employment. He nodded toward the gate, where 4 men in dark suits had emerged from unmarked vehicles. My own security team from Sentinel Services will be taking over the protection of the property. Protection from unauthorized occupants. That is. Travis stepped aside, motioning for his team to do the same. Mrs. Donovan, I apologize, but we cannot continue this assignment. Your retainer will be refunded in full. Vivian stood frozen on the steps, her face a mask of disbelief that rapidly transformed into fury. You can't do this. I have a court order. Based on fraudulent claims, Miles countered, ascending the steps. Floyd has already filed an emergency motion to vacate, supported by extensive evidence of your affair with Deacon Mercer and your conspiracy to illegally seize control of property that is demonstrably not part of our marital assets. He reached the top of the steps where Vivian stood, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. Up close, he could see the panic behind her eyes. You're locked out, Miles said softly, echoing the words she had planned to say to him. This is my house now. He smiled coldly. Actually, it always was. Miles, please. Vivian's tone suddenly shifted to pleading. We can talk about this. You don't understand. Understand perfectly, Miles interrupted. You and Deacon have been planning this for months. The emergency room visits, the calls to domestic violence hotlines, the systematic withdrawals from our joint account. It was quite thorough. Vivian's eyes widened. How did you? No. Miles finished for her. I've known about your affair since it began. Every conversation, every plan, every attempt to access my financial records. It's all documented. From inside the house came the sound of raised voices. Moments later, Deacon Mercer was escorted out the front door by 2 of the Sentinel security officers, looking disheveled and furious. Travis, what the hell? Deacon demanded, seeing his brother standing with Miles' team. Sorry, Deacon, Travis replied stiffly. Business decision. Miles turned to the Sentinel team leader. Please escort Mrs. Donovan and Mr. Mercer off the property. They can take 1 vehicle and any personal items they're currently carrying. Everything else can be arranged through our attorneys. Miles, you can't just throw me out. Vivian protested, her voice rising hysterically. Half of everything is mine by law. Half of our marital assets, Miles corrected her. This house, as you've just learned, is not a marital asset. Neither are most of my business holdings. But we can discuss the division of our IKEA dishware and the Target betting if you'd like. The security team moved forward, flanking Vivian and Deacon. This isn't over, Deacon snarled. Miles regarded him with cold amusement. Mr. Mercer, or should I say, Mr. Mercado, for you, it's very much over. Now, please leave my property before I decide to press charges for breaking and entering. As Vivian and Deacon were escorted to her BMW, Miles turned and entered his home. The massive oak door closed behind him with a satisfying thud. Inside, Floyd Newman waited in the foyer, a glass of scotch in hand. He offered it to Miles. Congratulations, Floyd said. Phase 1 complete, exactly as planned. Miles accepted the drink and took a sip, savoring the smoky flavor. Arrange for the locks to be changed tonight, and schedule a deep cleaning for tomorrow. Already done, Floyd assured him. The locksmith will be here within the hour, and the cleaning service is booked for 8 a.m. Miles nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. What was her face like when they drove away? Floyd allowed himself a small smile. Priceless, Miles. Absolutely priceless. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. The morning after the confrontation, Miles sat in his home office reviewing the surveillance footage from the previous night. After he had gone inside, leaving Vivian and Deacon to be escorted off the property, the cameras had captured their departure. Vivian's face was indeed a study in shock, rage, and disbelief as she was forced into the passenger seat of her own BMW, Deacon taking the wheel. Miles paused the footage, zooming in on Vivian's expression. 6 years of marriage, and he had never seen her look so authentic. The carefully maintained facade of sophistication and composure had crumbled completely, revealing the calculating opportunist beneath. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Miles called. Floyd entered, immaculately dressed, as always in a tailored navy suit, bearing a leather portfolio and a tablet. "Morning report," Floyd said, taking a seat across from Miles. "The locks have been changed. Security protocols updated. Sentinel has a 4-man team maintaining perimeter surveillance, rotating in 12-hour shifts." "Excellent," Miles nodded. "Any contact from Vivian or Deacon?" Vivian tried to return at midnight with 2 Boston police officers, claiming domestic violence and illegal eviction. Officers Ramirez and Talbot, both reasonable men. I showed them the property documentation and explained that Mrs. Donovan had attempted to fraudulently seize control of the residence. They advised her to pursue the matter through civil courts. Miles smiled slightly. "Where did they go after leaving here?" "According to our surveillance, they spent the night at the Four Seasons downtown. Room charged to your American Express, naturally." "Of course," Miles said dryly. "Cancel that card. In fact, cancel all cards where she's an authorized user." Floyd made a note on his tablet. "Already done. Also, as instructed, I've had her removed as a beneficiary from your life insurance policies and retirement accounts." "And the joint accounts?" "Frozen as of 9 a.m., Floyd confirmed. "She attempted to withdraw $50,000 from your joint checking account at 8:47 this morning. Request denied." Miles nodded thoughtfully. "She must be getting desperate. What about legal movements?" "Her attorney, Lorna Fitzgerald, filed an emergency motion this morning for temporary spousal support and access to marital funds. Judge Harriman denied it pending a full hearing next week. We've submitted our counterclaims, including the surveillance evidence of the affair and conspiracy." "Speaking of evidence," Miles said, "what's the status on Deacon Mercer, or Mercado, rather?" Floyd's expression took on a satisfied quality. "This is where it gets interesting. Our investigators have been thorough. Deacon changed his name from Mercado to Mercer 5 years ago, shortly after being released from the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles. Prison." Miles raised an eyebrow. "What for?" "Investment fraud. He posed as a wealth management consultant and siphoned nearly $2 million from clients before being caught. Served 18 months of a 3-year sentence." Miles leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "And Vivian knew this?" "Unknown," Floyd replied. "But there's more. Since his release, he's established a pattern. 3 relationships with wealthy, married women in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. Each followed the same trajectory. He's hired as a personal trainer, initiates an affair, and eventually encourages the woman to seek divorce. In the Chicago case, he actually married the woman after her divorce was finalized. That marriage lasted 8 months, during which he transferred nearly $600,000 from their joint accounts to offshore holdings. A professional, Miles mused. And his brother's security company? Legitimate, as far as we can tell. Travis appears to have distanced himself from Deacon's criminal activities. The company primarily provides bouncers to nightclubs and event security. The Executive Protection Division was only established 6 months ago, around the time Deacon and Vivian began planning their coup, Miles noted. Floyd nodded. It appears Deacon was planning to use this situation to help his brother expand into a new market segment. Family business, Miles said with a hint of irony. What's next from their side? Based on precedent from his previous patterns, Deacon will likely encourage Vivian to pursue aggressive legal action while simultaneously planning an exit strategy. Once he determines that the potential financial gain doesn't justify the effort, he typically disappears. Miles stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the meticulously maintained grounds. The gardeners were pruning the hedges that lined the eastern perimeter of the property. "He won't disappear this time," Miles said quietly. "Neither of them will." Floyd studied his client carefully. "What are you thinking, Miles?" Miles turned, his expression calm but determined. "Phase 2. It's time to dismantle Mr. Mercado's operation permanently and ensure that Vivian understands the full consequences of her choices." The private investigator has compiled extensive documentation on Deacon's previous frauds, Floyd offered, including victims who never reported to authorities. "We could anonymously provide this information to current victims' spouses, law enforcement in multiple jurisdictions, and financial regulators." "Do it," Miles decided. "But that's just the beginning. I want financial pressure applied immediately. Contact the Four Seasons and any other high-end hotels in Boston. Make it known that neither Vivian nor Deacon are authorized to charge anything to any of my accounts or business entities. They'll need to find alternative accommodations quickly," Floyd observed. "Precisely. Where's Vivian's family these days?" "Her mother was in Arizona, as I recall." "Phoenix," Floyd confirmed. "Retirement community. Vivian's sister Lorraine is in Seattle with 3 children. Neither has significant financial resources." Miles nodded. "Vivian hasn't spoken to her mother in years. Some disagreement over her first marriage. She won't go there. The sister is a possibility, but Vivian would consider it humiliating to show up destitute on Lorraine's doorstep." "That leaves Deacon's resources," Floyd noted, "which I suspect are more limited than he's led Vivian to believe," Miles said. "His type keeps just enough liquid assets for appearances. The rest is either tied up in illiquid investments or doesn't exist at all." A notification chimed on Floyd's tablet. He glanced down, then looked up at Miles with raised eyebrows. "It appears Vivian has just retained new counsel. She's dropped Lorna Fitzgerald and hired Garrett Osborne." Miles gave a low whistle. "Osborne doesn't come cheap. Starting retainer is $75,000, if memory serves." "Correct," Floyd confirmed. "Which raises the question, where did she get that kind of money on short notice with her access to your accounts cut off?" "Maybe Deacon is better funded than we thought," Miles mused. "Or perhaps Vivian had a rainy day fund I wasn't aware of. Either way, Osborne is formidable. This is escalating faster than anticipated. Should we adjust our strategy?" Floyd asked. Miles considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No. If anything, this confirms we're on the right track. Vivian's fighting back harder than I expected, which means she believes there's still something worth fighting for." "The divorce settlement," Floyd nodded. "Even without the house, Massachusetts law entitles her to a significant portion of assets acquired during the marriage." "Assets in my name," Miles clarified, "which, as you know, are minimal compared to the holdings of my various corporate entities." He returned to his desk and sat down. "Still, she could potentially claim a portion of Donovan Development's increase in value during our marriage. We need to neutralize that angle." Floyd hesitated. "There is one option we discussed previously, but you were reluctant to pursue it." Miles met his attorney's gaze. "The offshore restructuring." "Yes," Floyd confirmed. "If executed properly, it would render most of your assets unreachable in a divorce proceeding. The downside is that it would trigger certain reporting requirements and potentially attract regulatory attention." "I've always operated within the law, Floyd," Miles reminded him. "Complex, yes. Aggressive in tax planning, certainly. But legal." "The restructuring would remain legal," Floyd assured him. "But it would put you on the radar of agencies that have previously paid little attention to your holdings." Miles tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. "What's the timeline?" "For full implementation, 3 to 4 weeks. But we could begin the process immediately and establish the foundational structure within days." "Do it," Miles decided. "Full implementation before the first court hearing. I want Vivian to understand that every day she continues this fight, there will be less and less left to fight for." Floyd made a note on his tablet. "And the personal items she left behind? Her clothing, jewelry, personal effects? She'll likely file a motion for access. Have everything packed by a professional service," Miles instructed. "Inventory every item in the presence of a neutral third party. Store it all in a secure facility under sentinel supervision. She can access it through proper legal channels. Very thorough, Floyd observed. I learned from my father's mistakes, Miles said quietly. He trusted his wife. He didn't document anything. When she decided she wanted out, she took everything, including his dignity. Floyd nodded, understanding the personal dimension that drove his client's meticulous approach. If I may ask, what's your endgame here, Miles? What do you want when this is all over? Miles leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Vivian chose to betray me. Deacon chose to target me. Both thought I would be an easy mark. The busy, absent husband who could be manipulated and discarded. They need to learn how profoundly they misjudged the situation. And financially, I don't care about the money, Floyd. I can always make more. This is about principle. Vivian will receive exactly what the law requires. No more, no less. And it will be considerably less than she's expecting. Floyd closed his tablet and stood. I'll set everything in motion. The offshore restructuring team is standing by. We'll have initial papers for your signature by this evening. Good, Miles nodded. And Floyd? I want daily surveillance reports on both of them. Every move, every conversation, every transaction. No detail is too small. After Floyd left, Miles turned back to the frozen image on his computer screen. Vivian's face contorted with rage and disbelief as she was escorted off the property. He studied it for a long moment, searching for any flicker of the woman he had thought he married. There was nothing familiar there. Perhaps there never had been. Miles closed the file and opened his email. Dozens of business matters required his attention after 2 weeks abroad. Life continued. Empire building continued. And so did his carefully orchestrated dismantling of the two people who had thought they could take it all away. Chapter 6. The Strategy. 1 week after the confrontation at the mansion, Vivian and Deacon sat in a modest suite at the residence in Cambridge. It wasn't the Four Seasons. Those doors had closed to them along with every other luxury hotel in Boston once Miles made his influence known. The sleek modern furnishings and adequate kitchenette were a far cry from the sumptuous surroundings Vivian had grown accustomed to over the past 6 years. This is ridiculous, Vivian fumed, pacing the limited floor space. She was dressed in new clothes, mid-range brands from Nordstrom, not the designer pieces she'd left behind at the mansion. I'm entitled to half of everything, Deacon. Everything. Massachusetts law is clear on this. Deacon sat at the small dining table, his laptop open in front of him. His usual confident demeanor had given way to a tense vigilance over the past week. He ran a hand through his hair, which hadn't been professionally styled since the night they'd been ejected from the mansion. Garrett is working on it. Viv, he said, trying to maintain a reassuring tone. But Miles has clearly been preparing for this for months. The legal structures he's created are complex. I don't care how complex they are. We were married for 6 years. I'm entitled to my share. Deacon eyed her cautiously. He had never seen this side of Vivian, the polished socialite facade completely stripped away, revealing a hardness that both concerned and intrigued him. Garrett says Miles has initiated some kind of offshore restructuring, Deacon explained. He's moving assets beyond the reach of Massachusetts courts. Can he do that? Legally? Deacon sighed. According to Garrett, yes. The transactions themselves are legal. Morally questionable, perhaps, but legal. Many of the assets were already held in complex trust structures before your marriage. Vivian stopped pacing and fixed Deacon with an accusatory stare. You said this would work. You said with no prenup, I'd be entitled to half of everything. Half of the marital assets, Deacon corrected her carefully. But Miles has apparently been very diligent about keeping most of his wealth separate from marital assets. This is your fault, Vivian snapped. Your brilliant plan has left me homeless and cut off financially. The credit cards are canceled. The accounts are frozen. Even my damn gym membership was revoked yesterday. Deacon closed his laptop and stood, moving to intercept her pacing. He placed his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me, Viv. This is a setback, not a defeat. Miles is playing hardball, but so can we. We still have leverage. What leverage? Vivian demanded. He has the house, the money, the business, the high-priced attorneys. What do we have? A slow smile spread across Deacon's face. Information, and the threat of public exposure. Vivian frowned, not following. Exposure of what? The affair? Miles doesn't care about that. He's not running for public office. Not the affair, Deacon said. His business practices. Specifically, certain arrangements with development officials in Southeast Asia that might interest the Department of Justice. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you talking about bribes? Not bribes, Deacon corrected carefully. Consulting fees. Facilitation payments. Miles is too smart for outright bribes. But the lines get blurry in places like Vietnam and Indonesia. American prosecutors tend to take a dim view of such arrangements, regardless of what they're called locally. How do you know about this? Vivian asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Deacon hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I may have looked through some of his files in the home office while you were at your spa appointments. Professional curiosity. What he didn't mention was that searching for leverage in wealthy spouses' business dealings was standard procedure in his particular line of work. Before targeting any potential mark, Deacon conducted thorough research. Miles Donovan had seemed perfect, wealthy, frequently traveling, with a much younger wife who appeared increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage. You went through his files? Vivian's voice rose in disbelief. Without telling me, I was protecting you. Deacon countered smoothly. Plausible deniability. Besides, would you have wanted to know? Vivian considered this, then shook her head. No, probably not. She moved away from him, sitting on the edge of the bed. So what exactly are you suggesting? We blackmail Miles. Not blackmail, Deacon said, using the same careful tone he'd used to distinguish between bribes and consulting fees. Negotiation leverage. We don't want him prosecuted. We want a fair settlement. And you think threatening to expose his business practices will get us that? It's worth trying, Deacon said with a shrug. Miles values his reputation. A public scandal involving foreign corruption allegations would damage his business relationships, even if no charges were ever filed. Vivian was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. What if he calls our bluff? We don't actually have documents, do we? I took photos, Deacon admitted. Not comprehensive, but enough to establish a pattern. Names, dates, amounts, corporate entities that appear to exist solely to process these consulting fees. Enough to justify a closer look by federal authorities. Vivian looked at him with newfound respect, and perhaps a touch of wariness. You've done this before, haven't you? Before Deacon could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, his expression instantly darkening. What is it? Vivian asked. Travis, Deacon replied, reading the message. Bastion Security just lost their license to operate in Massachusetts. Effective immediately, pending review of fraudulent practices. Miles, Vivian whispered. Deacon nodded grimly. He's going after my brother now. This is getting personal. It was always personal, Vivian corrected him. We just didn't realize how personal until now. Deacon's phone buzzed again. Another text from Travis. Check your email. Now, with a sense of foreboding, Deacon reopened his laptop and pulled up his email. The most recent message had no subject line, just an attachment. The sender was anonymous, but the message content was clear enough. A courtesy copy of what's being sent to authorities in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and Boston tomorrow morning. Deacon opened the attachment. A comprehensive dossier on his activities over the past 5 years, including his name change, his prison sentence, and detailed accounts of his relationships with wealthy women in multiple cities. Financial records, photographs, hotel receipts, text message transcripts, all meticulously organized and annotated. Jesus Christ, he muttered, scrolling through the document with growing horror. What is it? Vivian moved to look over his shoulder. Her gasp told him she understood the implications immediately. He knows everything, Deacon said quietly. Everything about me, my past, my pattern. Your pattern. Vivian turned to face him, her expression hardening. What exactly does that mean, Deacon? He closed the laptop, buying a moment to collect his thoughts. It means Miles has been investigating me. digging into my background. And what did he find? Vivian's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. What pattern, Deacon? Deacon sighed, recognizing that further deception would only make things worse. I've had relationships with other wealthy women going through divorces. I've helped them navigate the process. Help them navigate the process, Vivian repeated slowly. You mean you've done this before? Seduced unhappy wives of rich men and encouraged them to file for divorce. It wasn't like that with us, Deacon insisted, reaching for her hand. What we have is real. Vivian pulled her hand away. Was any of it real? Or was I just another mark in your pattern? Before Deacon could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Travis again. I need to take this, he said, grateful for the interruption. It's my brother. Vivian walked to the suite's small window, staring out at the Cambridge skyline, while Deacon spoke in low, urgent tones behind her. Her mind was racing, reevaluating everything she thought she knew about her relationship with Deacon. Had it all been a calculated scheme? The initial flirtation during training sessions, the sympathetic ear when she complained about Miles' frequent absences, the gradual escalation from confidant to lover. She had believed they had a genuine connection, that Deacon saw her as more than just Miles Donovan's trophy wife. Now she wasn't sure what to believe. Damn it! Deacon's explosive exclamation pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see him staring at his phone, his face pale. What happened? Miles happened, Deacon spat. Travis just got a call from a Massachusetts banking commission. They're auditing all of Bastian's accounts based on allegations of money laundering. His business accounts are frozen. Can he do that? Vivian asked incredulously. Just make a phone call and shut down an entire business? Apparently, Miles Donovan can, Deacon replied bitterly. Travis says Miles' attorney called him directly afterward, offering to resolve the misunderstanding if Travis provides a sworn statement about our plan to take over the house. Vivian sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. He's systematically destroying everything around us. The house, the money, your brother's business. What's next? Deacon didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his laptop, a new thought clearly troubling him. We need to move, he said suddenly. What? What? If Miles has this much information about me, about us, then he knows where we're staying. He could be watching us right now. As if on cue, Deacon's phone chimed with a new email notification. He opened it cautiously. It contained only a photo, a high-resolution image taken that morning of Deacon and Vivian entering the Residence Inn, time-stamped 8:17 a.m. We're leaving, Deacon announced, already gathering his laptop and few belongings. Now, Vivian didn't argue. She quickly packed her new, less expensive clothes into a single suitcase, while Deacon checked out remotely through the hotel's app. Where are we going? She asked as they prepared to leave. Deacon paused at the door, meeting her gaze directly for the first time since the revelations about his past. First, somewhere safe. Then, we fight back. Miles thinks he's won because he has money and connections. But he's underestimating what people will do when they're cornered. Vivian studied him, seeing both the calculated manipulator revealed in Miles' dossier and the man she'd come to depend on over the past year. Whatever his initial motivations, they were in this together now. What's the plan? She asked simply. We use what we have, Deacon replied. The information about his business practices in Asia. But we don't just threaten to use it. We actually use it. Anonymous tip to the Justice Department. Copy to the SEC. Let Miles deal with federal investigators crawling through his business while we regroup. That's not negotiation leverage anymore, Vivian pointed out. That's scorched earth. Deacon nodded grimly. Miles crossed a line going after my family. This isn't about money anymore. It's about survival. Vivian shouldered her bag, her resolve hardening. Then let's survive. And make damn sure Miles doesn't. As they slipped out of the Residence Inn through a service entrance, neither noticed the unobtrusive gray sedan parked across the street. Inside, Harold Vincetti from Sentinel Security photographed their departure, noted the time, and made a phone call. Mr. Newman? They're on the move. Yes, sir. We'll maintain surveillance. The game of cat and mouse was entering a new phase. Miles had drawn first blood, but Deacon and Vivian were now ready to strike back with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. Miles, however, was far from finished with his carefully orchestrated plan. The opening moves had gone exactly as anticipated. Now it was time for the middle game, where the true complexity of his strategy would become apparent. Chapter 7. The Counter-Move. Miles Donovan sat in the understated conference room of Newman & Associates, reviewing the latest surveillance report on Vivian and Deacon. After fleeing the residence 3 days ago, they had checked into a budget hotel in Somerville under false names, paying cash. They remained there for less than 48 hours before moving again, this time to a short-term rental in Revere secured through an online marketplace. "They're burning through cash quickly," Floyd observed, seated across from Miles. "Our financial analysis suggests Vivian had approximately $120,000 in a private account we weren't previously aware of. Between Garrett Osborne's retainer, hotel expenses, and daily living costs, they've likely gone through at least half of that already." Miles nodded, unsurprised. Vivian was always careful to set something aside. "I actually respected that about her. They've been making frequent trips to public libraries and internet cafes," Floyd continued, "using public computers rather than their own devices. They're afraid we're monitoring their electronics," Miles deduced. "Smart move, albeit too late. Indeed, we've been able to recreate most of their online activities through our sources. They've been researching offshore corporate structures, particularly in the Cayman Islands and Singapore." Miles smiled faintly. "Looking for weaknesses in my financial armor. Any other significant movements?" Floyd hesitated briefly. "Yes. Yesterday, Deacon spent 3 hours at the Boston Public Library. He accessed the Department of Justice website, specifically pages related to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and whistleblower provisions. So they're considering that angle," Miles mused, betraying no concern. "As expected. You don't seem worried," Floyd noted carefully. "Because I'm not," Miles replied simply. "First, any allegations would be baseless. My international business dealings are complex but entirely legal. Second, even if they managed to trigger an investigation, it would be a minor inconvenience at most. And if they go public with accusations, the press might pick it up, especially given the circumstances." Miles leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "Floyd, how long have you known me?" "Nearly 20 years, the attorney replied. "And in those 20 years, have you ever known me to leave a significant vulnerability unaddressed?" Floyd conceded the point with a slight nod. "Never." "Exactly. Now, what's the update on our other initiatives?" Floyd consulted his tablet. "The offshore restructuring is proceeding ahead of schedule. Phase 1 is complete, with the primary assets now secured within the new structure. Personal court filings show that Vivian's attorney has requested an emergency hearing regarding financial support. Judge Harriman has scheduled it for next Tuesday. And our counter motion, filed yesterday. We've requested full financial disclosure from both Vivian and Deacon, including the source of funds for Osborne's retainer, given that all known marital accounts have been frozen." Miles nodded approvingly. "That should create some interesting pressure points. What about Travis Mercado?" "He's cooperating fully," Floyd reported. "Provided a sworn affidavit regarding the scheme to take over the house, including text messages between him and his brother discussing the plan. The Banking Commission has conditionally lifted the freeze on Bastion's operational accounts, though the audit continues." "Good. He made the right choice," Miles said. "And our final contingency?" Floyd's expression grew more serious. "In place, but..." He hesitated. "Miles, are you certain you want to proceed with that? It's extreme, even given the circumstances." "It's insurance, Floyd. Something I hope we won't need to use, but essential to have in place." Miles fixed his attorney with a steady gaze. "They try to take everything from me. Not just material possessions, but my home, my legacy. They need to understand that actions of that magnitude have consequences of equal measure." Before Floyd could respond, his assistant Bethany entered after a brief knock. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Newman, but there's a situation requiring immediate attention." "What is it, Bethany?" Floyd asked. "We've just received word from our sources at the Justice Department. An anonymous complaint was filed this morning alleging violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by Donovan Development, specifically regarding projects in Vietnam and Indonesia. Miles and Floyd exchanged looks. "They've made their move," Miles said quietly. "Sooner than I anticipated." Floyd turned back to Bethany. "What's the current status?" "The complaint has been received by the FCPA unit, but no formal investigation has been opened yet. They're conducting an initial assessment." "Thank you, Bethany," Floyd said. "Please ask Carlton to join us immediately." After Bethany left, Miles stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. "They're desperate," he observed, "making accusations without sufficient evidence, but potentially damaging nonetheless," Floyd cautioned. "An FCPA investigation, even one that ultimately finds no wrongdoing, can create significant business disruption and reputational damage. Which is precisely why we prepared for this scenario," Miles reminded him. "Activate Protocol Firebreak immediately." Floyd nodded and made a call. "Carlton, it's time. Initiate Firebreak. Full spectrum, effective immediately." Miles continued staring out the window as Floyd completed the call. Protocol Firebreak was a comprehensive counterintelligence and reputation management system they had developed years ago for just such a contingency. It involved multiple components: legal response teams, media management specialists, financial communication protocols, and, most importantly, activation of carefully cultivated relationships within key regulatory agencies. "Carlton confirms all elements are being activated," Floyd reported after ending the call. "The DOJ response team is already preparing a detailed rebuttal to any potential allegations. Our regulatory liaisons are being briefed." "Excellent," Miles said, turning back from the window. "Now, let's discuss next steps. I want to increase the pressure on our friends. They've already lost the house, access to funds, and Deacon's brother's business is compromised," Floyd pointed out. "What more leverage do we need?" "This isn't about leverage anymore, Floyd," Miles said, his voice hardening slightly. "This is about consequences. They've escalated by involving federal authorities with false accusations. That crosses a line." Floyd studied his client carefully. In 20 years, he had never seen Miles truly angry. Irritated, yes. Strategically aggressive, certainly, but never consumed by personal animosity. Now, however, he detected something new in Miles' demeanor. A cold fury carefully controlled beneath his composed exterior. "What do you propose?" Floyd asked cautiously. "First, I want a full audit of Vivian's activities over the past year. Financial transactions, communications, travel, everything. She's been planning this for months, which means she's likely made mistakes. Find them." Floyd made a note. "And Deacon, we already know about his criminal past. Now I want details about his victims, the women he's manipulated before. Contact them, discreetly. See if any would be willing to come forward with their experiences." "For a criminal complaint?" Miles shook his head. "Not yet. Information gathering first." "And Floyd? I want to know everything about that private account of Vivian's. Where the money came from, when it was established, whether any of it originated from our joint funds." "You're building a case for financial fraud," Floyd realized. "I'm exploring all options," Miles corrected. "They chose this battlefield. I'm simply ensuring I have the appropriate weapons." A knock at the door announced Carlton Renwick's arrival. The former Justice Department prosecutor, now a partner at a prestigious Washington law firm that specialized in FCPA cases, entered with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to high-stakes legal battles. "Miles," Carlton nodded in greeting. "Firebreak protocols have been initiated. My team is already in contact with the FCPA unit chief, a former colleague of mine. We're positioning this as a malicious complaint filed as leverage in a contentious divorce." "How are they responding?" Miles asked. "Cautiously," Carlton replied. "They're obligated to review all complaints, but the timing and anonymous nature raise red flags for them. I provided them with background on your current situation with your wife and her associate." "Good," Miles nodded. "Timeline. They'll conduct a preliminary review, which typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. However, given the circumstances and the information we've provided, I believe we can expedite a determination of insufficient basis to proceed within 7 to 10 days. That's not fast enough, Miles said firmly. I need this resolved before the divorce hearing on Tuesday. Carlton looked skeptical. Miles, even with my connections, the DOJ has processes. I understand bureaucratic constraints, Carlton, Miles interrupted. But I also understand that where there's a will, there's a way. Find the way. Carlton and Floyd exchanged glances before Carlton nodded. I'll do what I can. But I should note that an unusually rapid dismissal could itself raise questions. Then ensure the dismissal is both rapid and unquestionable, Miles replied. The complaint is baseless. The evidence of its malicious intent is clear. Make that reality apparent to your former colleagues. After Carlton left to make the necessary arrangements, Floyd turned to Miles. There's still the matter of the hearing on Tuesday. Garrett Osborne is good. He'll come prepared to paint you as a vindictive husband using your financial resources to punish Vivian. Let him try, Miles said dismissively. We have surveillance evidence of her conspiracy with Deacon, sworn testimony from Travis Mercado about their scheme to seize the house, and documentation of her attempts to access confidential financial records through your assistant. All true, Floyd acknowledged. But Osborne will argue that surveillance of your wife without her knowledge demonstrates controlling behavior. He'll claim her actions were those of a desperate woman trying to escape an emotionally abusive relationship. Miles raised an eyebrow. Is that your assessment of her best strategy? It's what I would argue in his position, Floyd admitted. The facts aren't on their side, so they'll attack your character and methods. Miles considered this, then nodded slowly. You're right, and that gives me an idea. He reached for his phone and made a call. Harold? Miles Donovan. I need a special surveillance assignment. Yes, highest priority. I want everything on Garrett Osborne. Personal habits, financial situation, potential conflicts of interest. Particularly any connection to Deacon Mercer or similar clients in the past. After ending the call, Miles noticed Floyd's concerned expression. Don't worry, Floyd. I'm not planning to blackmail Vivian's attorney. I'm simply gathering information that might explain his unusual willingness to take this case on short notice for a client with limited financial resources. And if you find such a connection, then we'll have additional context for the judge to consider. Miles smiled thinly. Transparency is important in legal proceedings, wouldn't you agree? Floyd didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, What's your endgame here, Miles? What does victory look like to you? Miles was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. Victory is Vivian understanding the full consequences of her betrayal. It's Deacon facing justice for his pattern of predatory behavior. It's restoration of what they tried to take from me. Not just material possessions, but peace of mind, the knowledge that my defenses worked. And financially, Vivian will receive exactly what the law requires. No more, no less. But she'll learn that her actions have permanently diminished what that amount would have been had she chosen a different path. Floyd nodded, making a final note on his tablet. I'll have the team work through the weekend preparing for Tuesday's hearing. And Miles, for what it's worth, I think you're handling this remarkably well, considering the circumstances. Miles smiled faintly. My father used to say that revenge is a dish best served cold. He was wrong about many things, but not about that. As Floyd gathered his materials to leave, Miles added one more thing. I want to move forward with the final contingency. Make the necessary arrangements. Floyd paused, his expression troubled. Miles, are you certain? Once initiated, it can't be easily recalled. I'm certain, Miles replied, his voice leaving no room for further discussion. They've shown their hand with the FCPA complaint. It's time to show them the consequences of their choices. After Floyd left, Miles remained in the conference room alone, reviewing the surveillance photos of Vivian and Deacon. 6 months ago, they had begun plotting to take everything from him. Now, they were running from hotel to hotel, their resources dwindling, their options narrowing. And Miles was just getting started. Chapter 8, The Revelation. The shabby one-bedroom apartment in Revere was a far cry from the luxury Vivian had grown accustomed to. The faded wallpaper, outdated furniture, and persistent smell of previous tenants' cooking had initially horrified her. Now, 5 days into their stay, she barely noticed the surroundings. Her focus had narrowed to survival and the increasingly desperate search for leverage against Miles. "Anything?" she asked, looking up from her laptop as Deacon entered the apartment. He had been out for hours, making calls from various public phones and meeting with potential allies. Deacon shook his head, his expression grim. "Nothing good. Our FCPA complaint was rejected by the Justice Department. Insufficient evidence to warrant a formal investigation was the official language." "How is that possible?" Vivian demanded. "You said the evidence we had was compelling." "It should have been," Deacon agreed, frustration evident in his voice. "But apparently Miles has friends in high places. My contact at the DOJ says the complaint was reviewed and dismissed in record time, less than 4 days. That never happens." Vivian slumped back in her chair. "So Miles wins again." "Don't say that," Deacon snapped, more harshly than he'd intended. He softened his tone immediately. "We're not done yet, but we need to be realistic about our position." "Which is?" Vivian asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Deacon sat heavily on the worn couch. "Not good. Travis called while I was out. Miles' attorney offered him a deal. Full restoration of Bastion's licenses and business accounts in exchange for detailed testimony about our plan." Vivian's eyes widened. "He wouldn't." "He already did," Deacon said flatly. "Travis chose his business over family loyalty. Can't say I blame him entirely. He has employees who depend on those paychecks. So now Miles has sworn testimony about our plans," Vivian summarized. "And we have. What exactly?" Deacon didn't immediately answer. His usual confident demeanor had eroded steadily over the past week as Miles' systematic counterattacks had closed off one option after another. "We have the hearing on Tuesday," he finally said. "Garrett still believes he can secure you temporary support." "Based on what?" "Miles has moved everything offshore. The house isn't a marital asset. My access to all accounts has been cut off." Vivian ran her hands through her hair, which hadn't seen her regular stylist in almost 2 weeks. "Face it, Deacon. We're outmatched." "No," Deacon insisted, a hint of his former confidence returning. "Miles is playing hardball, but so can we. He cares about his reputation. That's a vulnerability. A vulnerability we tried to exploit with the FCPA complaint, which went nowhere," Vivian reminded him. "That was just one approach," Deacon countered. "There are others. The press, for instance. A scorned wife's story of her controlling, manipulative husband who uses his wealth to punish her for wanting freedom. That narrative has legs, especially in the current climate." Vivian considered this. "You think the media would be interested?" "I know they would," Deacon assured her. "I've already had preliminary conversations with a producer at Channel 7. They're very interested in an exclusive interview." "And what would I say?" "That I had an affair and tried to lock my husband out of his own house." Deacon leaned forward intensely. "No, you'd say you felt trapped in a controlling relationship. That Miles was often absent, emotionally unavailable. That when you sought comfort elsewhere, he reacted with disproportionate financial punishment and surveillance, using his wealth as a weapon." "That's not entirely untrue," Vivian admitted slowly. "Exactly. The best narratives contain elements of truth. Miles was absent. He did keep you in the dark about financial matters. He did surveil you without your knowledge." Deacon reached for her hand. "This could work, Viv. It could pressure him into a more reasonable settlement offer before his reputation takes a hit." Before Vivian could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. They exchanged alarmed glances. No one knew they were staying here except Travis, who certainly wouldn't be visiting after his betrayal. "Are you expecting anyone?" Deacon whispered. Vivian shook her head, her heart racing. Had Miles' security team found them again? The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Ms. Donovan? Mr. Mercer? Boston Police Department. Please open the door." Deacon moved to the window and carefully peered out. "There's a patrol car outside," he confirmed. "2 officers. What do they want?" Vivian whispered anxiously. "Only one way to find out," Deacon replied, moving to the door. He opened it to reveal 2 uniformed officers, a man and a woman, both with serious expressions. "Deacon Mercer?" the male officer asked. "Yes." Deacon confirmed cautiously. I'm Officer Ramirez. This is Officer Chun. We need to speak with you and Ms. Donovan. What's this regarding? Deacon asked, not moving from the doorway. Sir, we prefer to discuss this inside, Officer Chun said firmly. Reluctantly, Deacon stepped aside to allow them entry. Vivian had risen from her chair, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Ms. Donovan? Officer Ramirez confirmed. Yes, Vivian nodded. What's this about? We're here to inform you that Mr. Deacon Mercer is being investigated for multiple counts of fraud, including allegations of a pattern of targeting wealthy married women and encouraging them to file for divorce while systematically removing assets from joint accounts. Vivian turned to Deacon, whose face had gone pale. What? These are baseless allegations, Deacon said quickly. Obviously orchestrated by Miles Donovan as part of his campaign against Ms. Donovan. Actually, sir, Officer Chun interjected, the complaints originated from Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. 3 separate victims have come forward with remarkably similar accounts of your activities. The Massachusetts Attorney General's office has been cooperating with authorities in those jurisdictions. This is absurd, Deacon protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Officer Ramirez turned to Vivian. Ma'am, we're also here to inform you that your attorney, Garrett Osborne, has withdrawn as your counsel of record as of this morning. What? Why would he do that? Vivian demanded, her mind reeling. We're not privy to that information, Officer Chun replied, but we're required to serve you with these papers. She produced an envelope from her jacket and handed it to Vivian. This is a notice of deposition. You're being called to testify regarding Mr. Mercer's activities and your joint financial dealings over the past year. Vivian accepted the envelope with a trembling hand. Am I being charged with something? Not at this time, Officer Ramirez answered. The investigation is focused on Mr. Mercer's pattern of activity across multiple states. However, I should advise you that your involvement is being reviewed. This is Miles, Deacon said bitterly. He's behind all of this. Sir, these investigations were initiated by complaint from women in 3 different states, Officer Chun repeated. Unless you're suggesting Mr. Donovan somehow orchestrated multiple women to come forward simultaneously in different jurisdictions. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Deacon insisted. He has resources, connections. Mr. Mercer, Officer Ramirez interrupted firmly. At this time, you are not being arrested. However, you are required to make yourself available for questioning. Detective Alvarez from Major Crimes will contact you tomorrow to arrange a formal interview. After the officers left, Vivian turned to Deacon, her expression a mixture of shock and growing suspicion. What the hell was that? She demanded. Multiple women? A pattern? Deacon ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. It's Miles, Viv. He's trying to drive a wedge between us. Fabricating evidence. Pressuring my past relationships to make false statements. Is any of it true? Vivian pressed, the envelope from the police clutched tightly in her hand. Have there been other women? Other divorces? Deacon hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. No, of course not. Vivian stared at him, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. The charming personal trainer with the too-perfect physique and the conveniently sympathetic ear. The man who had encouraged her dissatisfaction with Miles, who had suggested the possibility of a significant divorce settlement, who had guided her step by step through a plan that now lay in ruins. You're lying, she said quietly. The police officers were right, weren't they? This is your pattern. Find a wealthy, unhappy wife. Seduce her. Encourage her to seek divorce. Then what? Drain her accounts once she gets her settlement? Vivian, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. No, she cut him off. For the first time in months, I am thinking clearly. She took a step back from him. Miles was right about you. About us. This whole thing was a con from the beginning. Deacon's demeanor shifted suddenly, the desperate defensiveness replaced by a cold calculation that Vivian had never seen before. Fine, he said, his voice hardening. Yes, there were others. But what difference does it make now? We're in this together, Vivian. Miles has outmaneuvered us at every turn. Our only chance is to stick together and find a new angle. Why? Vivian challenged. So, you can move on to your next target once you've bled me dry? How much of my private account have you already transferred to yourself? Deacon's silence was damning. Get out, Vivian said, her voice trembling with rage. Get your things and get out. Don't be stupid, Deacon snapped. You need me. The hearing is in 3 days. Without an attorney, without support. I'll figure it out, Vivian interrupted. But I want you gone. Now. For a moment, Deacon looked like he might argue further. Then his expression shifted again, a cold smile spreading across his face. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. But fine. Have it your way. He gathered his laptop and a small bag of essentials. At the door, he paused. When Miles crushes you in court on Tuesday, don't come looking for me. After he left, Vivian sank onto the couch, the police envelope still clutched in her hand. Her mind was racing, reevaluating every moment of her relationship with Deacon in light of this new information. The attentive listener. The gradually increased physical training sessions. The first accidental touch that led to more. The sympathetic conversations about Miles' emotional distance. Had any of it been real? Or had she simply been another mark in a practice con? Her phone chimed with an incoming text. Unknown number. With a sense of foreboding, she opened the message. Ms. Donovan, this is Floyd Newman. In light of recent developments, Mr. Donovan is willing to discuss settlement terms. If you're interested, please call my office to arrange a meeting. This offer expires at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Vivian stared at the message for a long time. Miles had known all along what Deacon was. Known that their relationship was built on manipulation and deceit. And now, with Deacon exposed and her attorney withdrawn, Miles was offering an olive branch. Or was it a trap? Another move in a game she was clearly losing? Vivian set down the phone without responding and opened the envelope from the police. Inside was indeed a formal notice of deposition, but also a second document that made her breath catch. It was a detailed financial analysis of her private account, the one she thought no one knew about. The analysis showed systematic transfers over the past 3 months. Small amounts moved regularly from her account to an offshore entity registered in Panama. More than $60,000 in total. Transfers she had never authorized. Transfers Deacon must have initiated using her account information. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. Evidence secured from Deacon's laptop. Multiple similar patterns documented with previous victims. Consider your options carefully. Vivian's hands trembled as she set down the document. The full magnitude of her situation was becoming clear. She had been manipulated by Deacon. She had betrayed Miles. She had participated in a scheme to illegally seize property. And now she was alone, without legal representation, facing a divorce hearing in 3 days. For the first time since the confrontation at the mansion, Vivian Donovan began to cry. Not from anger or frustration, but from the crushing realization of her own terrible mistakes. Chapter 9. The Resolution. The conference room at Newman & Associates was deliberately intimidating. All polished mahogany and leather chairs, with a sweeping view of Boston Harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows. Vivian sat alone on one side of the massive table, painfully aware of her faded jeans and simple blouse, the best she could manage from her rapidly dwindling wardrobe. Across from her sat Miles, impeccable in a tailored navy suit, flanked by Floyd Newman and a younger attorney she didn't recognize. Miles' expression was unreadable as he studied a document before him, seemingly in no hurry to acknowledge her presence despite the fact that she had been waiting for nearly 10 minutes. Finally, he looked up. His eyes held none of the warmth she remembered from their early years together, but neither did they contain the anger she had expected. Instead, there was something more disturbing, clinical detachment, as if she were a mildly interesting business problem to be solved. Thank you for coming, Vivian, Miles said, his voice neutral. I understand yesterday was difficult for you. Vivian straightened in her chair, determined to maintain her dignity despite everything. You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Finding Deacon's previous victims, getting my attorney to withdraw, even the police showing up exactly when they did. Miles didn't deny it. I simply accelerated processes that would have happened eventually. Deacon Mercer, or Mercado, rather, has left a trail of victims across the country. It was only a matter of connecting them and providing the evidence to the appropriate authorities. And my attorney? Floyd Newman answered this question. Mr. Osborne withdrew after learning of Mr. Mercer's criminal background and the potential implications for your case. It was his decision, made to protect his professional reputation. Vivian doubted that was the whole story, but she let it pass. Why am I here, Miles? Your text said you wanted to discuss settlement terms. Yes, Miles confirmed. The divorce hearing is Monday. I see no reason to drag this out further. The younger attorney slid a document across the table to Vivian. This is our proposed settlement agreement. I'd be happy to walk you through the key provisions. Vivian didn't touch the document. I don't have an attorney anymore. I'm not signing anything without legal representation. A prudent decision, Miles acknowledged. We've arranged for independent counsel to review the agreement with you. Barbara Winters is waiting in the adjacent conference room. She's a respected family law attorney with no previous connection to me or my businesses. Vivian was surprised by this concession. Why would you do that? Because I want this agreement to withstand any future challenge, Miles replied simply. I have no interest in revisiting this matter once it's resolved. Vivian finally reached for the document, scanning the first page. The language was dense legal terminology, but the bottom line figures caught her attention immediately. $3 million? She asked, looking up in surprise. Plus the condo in South Beach. Yes, Miles confirmed. Paid in a lump sum upon finalization of the divorce, with the South Beach property transferred to your name within 30 days. Vivian was suspicious. After everything that had happened, the affair, the attempt to seize the house, the FCPA complaint, Miles was offering a settlement that appeared genuinely generous. What's the catch? She asked bluntly. Miles almost smiled. Several, actually. The agreement includes a strict confidentiality clause regarding our marriage and divorce. Any violation results in forfeiture of the entire settlement amount. There's also a non-disparagement provision that prevents you from making any negative statements about me or my businesses to the media or through social media. That's standard, Vivian noted. There must be more. There is, Miles admitted. The agreement requires your full cooperation with authorities in their investigation of Deacon Mercer's activities. You'll need to provide complete and truthful testimony regarding his methods and actions. You want me to help you destroy him, Vivian said flatly. I want you to help his victims seek justice, Miles corrected, including yourself. Vivian was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. And if I refuse? If I decide to fight this in court? Floyd Newman cleared his throat. Ms. Donovan, I believe you should discuss that scenario with independent counsel. But I can tell you that we have substantial evidence regarding your participation in Mr. Mercer's scheme, including recorded conversations planning the takeover of the house and the fraudulent presentation of ownership documents to Bastion Security. You were surveilling me in our home, Vivian said, anger flaring. Yes, Miles acknowledged without apology. After finding evidence of your affair and overhearing a phone conversation that suggested you were planning something more than just a divorce. The surveillance was legal and will be admissible in court. Vivian felt cornered, yet the settlement offer was far more generous than she had expected given the circumstances. Why offer me anything at all? You could crush me in court. We both know it. For the first time, Miles' composure slipped slightly, a flash of genuine emotion crossing his face. Because despite everything, we were married for 6 years. Whatever you became, whatever we became, there was something real at the beginning. The unexpected sentiment caught Vivian off guard. Before she could respond, Miles continued, his business demeanor returning. Additionally, prolonged legal proceedings benefit neither of us. This settlement allows us both to move forward without the distraction and public spectacle of a contentious divorce trial. Vivian looked down at the settlement document again. $3 million was a fraction of Miles' true wealth, but it was still substantial, enough to maintain a comfortable lifestyle indefinitely if managed properly. The South Beach condo was worth at least another $2 million in the current market. What about the house? My personal belongings? Your personal effects have been packed and placed in storage, Floyd explained. Upon signing this agreement, you'll receive access to retrieve them. As for the house is not negotiable, Miles interrupted firmly. It was never a marital asset, and it remains mine. Vivian nodded, not surprised. The house had emotional significance for Miles that went beyond its considerable monetary value. It represented the empire he had built, the security he had created for himself. I'd like to speak with this independent attorney now, Vivian decided, before I make any decisions. Of course, Floyd agreed, standing. I'll escort you to her. As Vivian rose to follow Floyd, Miles spoke again, his voice quiet but clear. One more thing, Vivian, this offer is final. There will be no negotiation, no counterproposals. You accept these terms, or we proceed to court on Monday. Vivian paused, meeting his gaze directly. You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you? From the moment you suspected the affair, you've been orchestrating every move, every reveal, every consequence. Like one of your business strategies. Miles didn't confirm or deny it, but his expression told her everything she needed to know. Goodbye, Miles, she said softly and followed Floyd from the room. 2 hours later, Vivian returned to the main conference room. Barbara Winters, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor, accompanied her. The attorney had thoroughly reviewed the settlement agreement, explaining each provision in detail and openly acknowledging both its generous aspects and its restrictive covenants. My client has made her decision, Barbara announced as they took their seats. Miles and Floyd looked expectantly at Vivian. I accept the terms, Vivian said simply, with one request. The terms are non-negotiable, Miles reminded her. I'm not asking for more money or assets, Vivian clarified. I want 5 minutes alone with you before I sign. Just to talk. Miles considered this for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. After everyone else had left the room, Vivian and Miles sat in silence for a moment, the settlement agreement between them on the table. Why did you marry me? Vivian finally asked. You're thorough, methodical. You must have vetted me before proposing. Did you know about my first marriage? The pattern even then? Miles studied her thoughtfully. I knew your first marriage ended badly. That your ex-husband claimed you married him for his money, though he had considerably less than I do. I didn't see a pattern. I saw a beautiful, intelligent woman who challenged me in ways no one else had. So I genuinely fooled you, Vivian said, with no satisfaction in her voice. Perhaps we fooled each other, Miles suggested. You saw the successful businessman, the lifestyle, the security. I saw the woman I wanted you to be, not who you actually were. Vivian couldn't argue with that assessment. When did you first suspect? About Deacon and me? March, Miles answered. You received a text while we were having dinner. Your expression changed just for a moment, a look I'd never seen before. You said it was your sister, but you angled the phone away as you replied. It seemed insignificant, but it registered. All the way back in March, Vivian marveled. And you never said anything. Just watched and waited. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, Miles explained. At first, I thought it was just an affair. Painful, but not uncommon. When I realized it was something more orchestrated, I adjusted my approach accordingly. Vivian nodded slowly. You know, he was using me too. The police were right. It was his pattern. Find a wealthy, unhappy wife, manipulate her into a divorce, then gradually siphon off her settlement. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was so clever. We all have blind spots, Miles said, without mockery. Mine was believing that the prenuptial agreement was unnecessary because what we had was different. Would a prenup have changed anything? Vivian asked. The house still would have been protected by your trust structure. True, Miles acknowledged, but it would have clearly defined expectations from the beginning. Perhaps that clarity would have prevented all of this. Vivian reached for the settlement agreement and pulled it toward her. I'm sorry, Miles. Not for getting caught, but for who I became. I don't expect you to believe that or care, but I wanted to say it. Miles watched as she picked up the pen. What will you do now? After the divorce is finalized? Start over, Vivian said simply. Somewhere new. Away from Boston, away from. She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything around them. Away from all of this. And Deacon, Vivian's expression hardened. I'll testify. Everything I know, everything we planned. He deserves whatever consequences come his way. Good. Miles nodded, satisfied. Vivian signed all 3 copies of the agreement, her signature steady despite the finality of the moment. One last question. The offshore restructuring you initiated when all this began, was that real or just another pressure tactic? Miles smiled slightly. What do you think? I think you move enough assets to make the threat credible, but not the entire empire. You're too careful to trigger that level of regulatory scrutiny unless absolutely necessary. Very perceptive, Miles acknowledged. You would have made an excellent business partner in another life. Vivian stood, gathering her purse. Goodbye, Miles. I'd say I wish you well, but I think we're beyond such pleasantries. Actually, Miles replied, rising as well. I do wish you well, Vivian. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to bitterness serves no purpose. I've built my life around protecting what's mine. I've succeeded in that. What you do with your future is your own concern. As Vivian reached the door, Miles spoke one final time. Just remember the terms of our agreement. Complete confidentiality. No public statements. No media interviews. Your cooperation with authorities regarding Deacon. Any violation. I know, Vivian interrupted. I forfeit everything. She turned to face him one last time. Don't worry, Miles. I've learned my lesson about underestimating you. I won't make that mistake again. After she left, Floyd returned to the conference room. That went more smoothly than expected, he observed, collecting the signed agreements. She's pragmatic, Miles replied. She recognized her position and made the rational choice. And Mercer? The investigation is proceeding. Miles nodded. Multiple jurisdictions now. The evidence we provided has opened several previously closed cases. He'll face charges in at least 3 states. Consequences, Floyd noted. As you said from the beginning. Yes, Miles agreed. Actions have consequences. Vivian's affair cost her our marriage and most of the financial security she coveted. Her participation in Deacon's scheme cost her any moral standing in the divorce. And Deacon's pattern of predatory behavior will finally cost him his freedom. And for you, Floyd asked, what consequences do you face from all this? Miles was silent for a moment, looking out the Boston skyline where the afternoon sun glinted off the harbor waters. I trusted unwisely, he said finally. The consequence is that I won't make that mistake again. He turned back to Floyd, his expression resolute. Now, let's get back to business. The Singapore development won't manage itself. As they gathered their